recording?
Okay. Yep, we are all set.
Okay. All right, let's bring this meeting to order. This is the May 19th, 2020 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting being held on Zoom, and this meeting is being recorded. Next item are the approval of the, what was it, the May 5th, 2020 meeting minutes. Any comments, changes?
Yeah, the date that was given on the document wasn't May 5th, and I think it said draft. I think it was some date in April.
Oh, didn't see that.
I got a couple comments. You done, David?
Yeah.
Is Gretchen there?
He is.
Okay. On the 149 State Street, on the second line, it says situation. I think it should say situated. And then on 468th Street, at the end, it says we voted to continue. And then it says we voted to close the public hearing. And then it says we voted to close the public hearings. So I'm not sure that we actually did all that, but we shouldn't have voted to close the public hearing if we continued it.
No.
Right.
Okay.
I'll just take that out.
Okay. That's it for me.
Okay. When it's a 4-hour meeting, I get a little buggy-eyed when proofing.
Don't blame you.
All right. We all set? Get a motion?
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I say yes. Okay, next item. Plum Island updates. Do we have any Plum Island updates?
Not too many. Not really, actually. No new news since the last meeting. I don't think there's been any additional damage out there on Reservation Terrace, but I did speak with the mayor today and found out that she is working closely with DEP right now to come up with a permittable protective measure for the top of the dune, so that whatever happens out there will be approved by DEP and permittable. It'll eventually come to us for permitting, I guess, but they're putting together some potential scenarios right now. So I don't have any details on what that would be, but it would be a project that would meet the standards of the Wetlands Protection Act. So that will be good.
Okay. All right. Next item is an informal discussion with Jerry Mullins for Gloria Brownhart Bike Trail, Nature Trail upgrades. Let's keep this to under 10 minutes, please, Jerry.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Basically, I'm trying to make a presentation to you about two major actions that we need to do on the trail. And one of them is there's some really rusted guardrails that are overshadowing the culverts, and we were thinking about removing them. And we also have the whole stretch of the roadbed. We were going to put a 4-foot sod on either side of the bike trail, and we already located all the storm drains that are on the left and right side, so that the water could evacuate from that area once that we've already done the berm. As you can see, there's a little demonstration that we've done at the beginning of the thing, showing you what it would look like. And the landscaper vendor that we've talked to talks about a minimum of 4 inches for the berm. And you can see off a little bit later in this some supporting images of some of the storm drains. We've asked the DPS to remove the concrete obstruction so that that full drainage, but they still take in the water now, and those storm water still actually function very well throughout the entire stretch of the roadbed. Bluntly, we really want to try to avoid an NOI, and we're hoping that because most of the work is on the roadbed and isn't really affecting the outside beyond the 3 lanes, we were hoping that you could get some input from you as to what we can do. And as soon as we do get your input, we'll turn around and file an official RDA so we can see what we can do about, and we're very open to your instructions as to how. But as you can see from the photographs about the real issue is those rusted guardrails. They are very, very close to the culverts. And so my consultant has asked Beals and Thomas that we could actually do some kind of a barrier right along the edge there so that when the vendor removes them, it wouldn't affect the water down below. And also my vice president, George Comiskey, suggested perhaps we could even just solder off the surface so that they weren't present. And what's going to be in replace of them, as you can see from the presentation, is some fencing that would be put around the culverts. And that fencing will actually be bored into that outer lanes and won't even be put into the ground, but right up as, just beyond the berms, and will help people get away from falling into the culverts.
So let me get this right. You're going to put 4 inches of soil on top of hot top
Exactly.
and expect things to grow?
Yes, they do. And we've already shown the demonstration. First 300 feet of saw we put down.
Yeah, but have they gone through a drought?
They've gone through the last summer.
Okay, well, 4 inches doesn't seem like much to me, but on another note, right now you've been down there cutting trees and it's a disgusting mess with what you've left. You've cut those birch trees off, which I think 2 years ago you came to us asking for permission in your RDA or NOI, which we haven't given you permission yet to do. You cut them off at 6 feet above the ground. Some of them are cut and leaning and some of them are partially cut. You've left trees lying all over the place. I don't have a high degree of confidence in what you're doing.
Well, those, as you can see from a separate document I've shown you, and unfortunately in the future, in the past, I didn't actually show you how bad these birch trees are. They're very, very gymnastic in their behavior.
Jerry, I've been down there many times and I know what they are.
But especially during the winter, when the snow is on them, they are literally horizontal and block off these trails. It's supposed to be a trail that's going to be used year round. And we're going to be cutting up those birch trees and putting them onto lower areas of the bike trails, the nature trails that are a little low so they can be elevated. They decompose very quickly. And most of what you see there will be cut off. Now we had, basically these are the ones that lean out into the bike path.
Jerry, are those birch trees that you all are talking about, were they in the buffer zone to any wetlands, or are they just alongside the trail in general?
They're alongside the trail. They're right on the edge. What they do is they grow on the edge of the 3 lanes, and then they lean over quite considerably on there.
Some of them may have been in the buffer zone and some of them may have been in the 25-foot no disturb zone.
Okay. Well, Jerry, just so you know, if you're going to be cutting any trees within any part of the buffer zone, the 100-foot buffer zone or the 25-foot no disturb, it does need review by the Conservation Commission. You need to show that those trees are either a hazard to public safety or that they're sick or dying. and
Well,
also therefore a hazard to public safety. Otherwise, they need to be left alone.
They are a hazard of public safety.
Well, I get what you're saying, but we did not get any information about that before you went and cut them.
Well, we also have two documents. There was a trail agreement that we had to get together for the DCR grant. And it was understood under that trail agreement, which I've enclosed in the packet, about cutting back some of the brush and the trees. And then we also had a historical commission that said that we had to retain the roots and the base, but we could clear cut back. And so those were the two things. Well, since I had been working throughout all the trail system to clear the trails, I felt I had the authority to go ahead and do that. And
well, I think there's a difference between cutting the tree off up 6 feet up and pruning it. So in one instance, you're actually killing the tree. In the other instance, you are just pruning it. So maybe we need to just pay a little bit more attention to what the tree management plan is for this trail.
there'll be no more cutting of any trees. That's it.
Yeah, my point was that when you appeared before us in an informal presentation, it was either a year or 2 years ago, part of what you were seeking permission for in what would have been an RDA or an NOI was what you've already done. So.
Yeah, that is true. But the new, yeah, that was an issue. That was a problem, which I don't believe is going to happen again. And I guess we're going to focus on the newer stuff, or I should say, it better not happen again.
Right. There'll be no more cutting of trees.
Okay. So I think he's going to need recommendations on whether this is going to be whether an NOI is required or an RDA is required. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, you know, if you're filing an RDA, you have to describe exactly what you're going to do and either show that none of this affects any of the wetlands, or if it does, that it's very minimal and has offsiding, you know, good effects. And if they feel that they can do that, right, such a thing, then feel free to file an RDA. And if we disagree with it, we can deny it, and then you have to go the route of a notice of intent.
Gary, what is the issue with not doing an NOI?
Because we just wanted to be able to get the sod light down this year, and to and really the real issue, of course, is those guardrails. I wanted to get your input if perhaps we should just leave them alone. I'd like to get rid of them, but they're so close to the culverts, and my consultant says we could probably put a barrier in there, a fabric, not a fabric, hail bale type of roll around there just to protect it. But I didn't want it to affect. I didn't think the sod on the pavement was going to affect anything at all when it comes to the wetlands or to the Little River.
So Jerry, I have a question. I can see the guardrails there. They're not in great shape, but I do think that maybe trying to pull those out along the length might do more harm than what you are anticipating or envisioning, and that might kick it into a notice of intent rather than an RDA, because you're going to be disturbing more earth. I don't know if you're going to have any trouble getting those things out. I mean, maybe sawing them off, like someone had suggested, maybe a better solution if you really have to get rid of them. But can you just tell us why you can't leave them in place? I know they're not attractive, but what's the problem with them?
It's purely cosmetic.
Yeah.
I just wanted the bike trail to look professional, and you have these ghastly. There's only 3 stretches of them, but I knew that would be a difficult problem, and they are going to be involved. Well, a couple of them are twisted around trees.
And are you proposing to you showed a couple pictures of some new fences, like a split rail, and then there's a photo of a solid fence. Are you proposing to replace these guardrails with that new fencing?
Right. It would be closer to the berm.
And what is the purpose of the fencing? Because I guess that the guardrails were there for when it was actually a roadway. But now that it's just a bike trail and a walking trail, what would be the purpose of the fencing in that location?
Because the ground, some of the pictures that you'll see of the old guardrail, it slopes down toward the culverts. So if you're off on the bike trail, it's very easy for somebody to walk off and then fall into the culvert if there's nothing between the bike trail and the culvert. And so that fence is there just to protect people, and it would be primarily around the culverts. Right?
Yeah. Okay. You mean the drainage channel?
See that slope there?
Yeah.
That's really steep, and it's too easy for people to fall into the culvert.
Yeah. So, okay, I see what you're saying. Then in that case, you showed 2 pictures. One is a split rail and one is the solid fence. I would not propose the solid fence for this project.
It's the split rail. It's what we're going for.
Yeah. The photos showed a few different versions of fencing. I don't know if you meant to.
That is in the south. That's an erosion fence down at the south part of the bike trail.
Okay.
So don't worry about that. That's already been built and put down there at the bottom.
Okay.
From a previous RDA that was put through by the Eagle Scout.
Yep. All right. So, I mean, the way I'm looking at this is if you were to propose a split rail fence, if you saw off the guardrails rather than sort of excavate them out, then I think that you could get away potentially with an RDA for this project if if the scope of work is what I'm understanding it to be, which is just the 4 inches of sod being placed over existing pavement and the fencing. And then again, I think what's said about can that sod survive over the pavement? Maybe it can, but the conditions have to be very good for when that is laid down so that it really takes, and it could wash out if it's not done correctly. So that's something that you need to make sure is done, with a lot of care to make sure that it does not move out of place and wash away.
Right. My landscaper is recommending 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches, and it probably would be better to have it 6 inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not on any slopes. Is it on any slopes or is it on this flat?
It's flat. That's why we need those side openings toward those storm drains.
Yeah, my preference would be to just leave the old guardrails there as kind of a historic reference to what the roadbed was, and maybe put some signage saying these were the northbound lanes of I-95 before they widened and straightened it to its current location. And then that's all that sort of work you don't have to mess with because you're going to put the split rail fences there anyways.
Okay, great, yeah. That would definitely save us some money.
Yeah, just leave them.
So Jerry, on going down to the drains, you're going to have your 6 inches of soil and sod on top of that, and a 2 or 3 foot opening going down to the drain, or
right.
As far as these drains go, are you replacing the drains or just removing some concrete that's obstructing the flow into them?
Just removing the concrete. They're already there and they're doing their job. If you go down to, like, for example, a river crossing, you can still see the water's gushing out from these existing storm drains. They're doing their job just like they were, and they are existing all across the entire abandoned roadbed.
Okay, so this is the system that was used for the road.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's
Jerry,
pretty
do you
expensive.
think that there will be erosion of your sod in those areas if we get a 10-year, 20-year, 100-year storm? I mean, I could see your sod just washing away on those drain things because there's nothing underneath to hold it. You're putting it on pavement.
Right.
Well, we're planning on using Mass DOT, what's called conservation grass. This grass is like titanium. It's what you'll see up around the Story Avenue. And when they continually mow it, and it bores down into any crack that is available on the old abandoned roadbed. And we've had a couple trees grow up through it. And so already they're going to take this massive root system called conservation grass and bore down and hopefully break up the old roadbed.
And this is sod you're talking about, and this isn't sort of hydro seeding or anything like that. You're talking about true sod, like rolled out sod.
No, just soil.
Soil with a seed mix on top.
Exactly.
Okay, that's very different than sod. That's not
Yes.
sod. Okay, so that changes my whole outlook on this.
It's dirt. It's dirt.
Yeah,
It's
dirt. And dirt
conservation
wash
grass.
away. Dirt can easily wash away, especially if it's just placed on pavement.
That's what the grass is for, and it's powerful stuff. Mass DOT, of course, uses it all along the highway systems.
But it will take time for that.
This is your consultant that's recommending it. Perhaps in the document, you could get some input from them on the viability of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'd have to be part of any filing.
Yeah, and this would need. Go ahead, Paul.
No, we want to know how it's going to work, why you think it's going to work, what are the caveats on it.
No,
That's your job.
it's the opening. If you saw the drawings by the consultant, not very good ones, of course, because it's PDF, but the opening part of the drawings, it would be page 2. And down here on, he says, bike trail improvement detail shows the sod layer going down onto it. So he's aware of this
Well,
soil.
First you have to stop calling it sod because it's not sod. Then, I mean, if it's soil, the erosion controls that are going to need to be in place for this to be able to go forward are going to be significant to make sure that the stuff doesn't wash out into those streams and into these storm basins, because you clog those things up pretty quick with a whole lot of that soil.
And would this throw it into the realm of a notice of intent?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think, especially down on the southern end where you're very close to the wetlands, down there where that observation platform is and north of there, you're well within the buffer zone, and I'm pretty sure you're in the 25-foot no disturb zone. I think this needs an NOI so we can have more control over it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Steve. Just this discussion kind of highlights how many conditions are going to need to be placed on the project. And whenever there's more than like 1 or 2 special conditions on an RDA, it should be a notice of intent.
Okay, so you're recommending an NOI. Okay.
Jerry, if you get that into us, I mean, we can't do it for the next meeting because we're probably already at the deadline, but the meeting after that, I think you could get some work done this summer, if not all of it.
Okay.
Although you might want to wait to fall if you're hydro seeding, but I'm not an expert on that.
Okay, we got anything else? 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 Okay, we got
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you for your input.
Yep.
And,
You got your marching orders.
yep, I sure do.
All right. Thanks for the discussion.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right, next item. Jeffrey and Donna Sprague, 1563rd Street, request for a certificate of compliance.
Okay, is Tom Hughes here by any chance? Let's see, Tom, I'm wondering if Tom can
This is
address
Jeff.
this quickly.
Oh, Jeff
This is-
Sprague.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is Jeff Sprague.
Jeff, you
Hi.
can go.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. So we were before you in January to look for this certificate of compliance, and we went away with the action to do some additional planting. Shortly after that, we ran into the COVID situation, so we haven't finished the work yet. And we're hoping that you would grant us another continuance here for a couple of months so we could finish the planting work that we set out to finish.
Well, that sounds fine.
Yeah,
So if we could go 2 months from now, that I think that'd be more than enough for the landscaper to help us get it done.
So like the first meeting in July or?
August.
Or July 23rd. Or July 16th, it looks like, actually.
But if you wanted it a couple of months.
Yeah, July
I guess
6th.
July would do that.
July 16th is pretty much a couple of months from now. That would be sufficient, if that's okay with you all.
It's not a Tuesday.
Jim, can I just ask what it is that you're planting? And does it need to be planted, can it be planted in this spring, or should it be planted in the fall? Is it dependent on growing season?
We're planting a couple of shrubs and some ground cover, and we've been working with the folks at Swayze and Alexander, and they say they can get it done now and that it should be fine.
Okay, great.
Are
Okay.
these
Good.
native plants?
Yes,
Okay. Native to Plum Island?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, to remind the commission, there was a small area in front of the house where the things were moved because of a telephone pole. And it's a real small area, and it's small enough that things can be watered, and they should be able to be planted, you know, even in summer. They'll just need to be cared to.
That's
Thanks,
fine.
Tom.
Yeah, it's July 21st.
Well, you can evaluate when we get there, whether that's enough.
Okay, yeah.
So should we be placed on the agenda for a specific date, or contact you later for that?
Well, we'd have to put it on for a specific date, but it can always be changed later.
Okay, so it sounds great to us if we could plan on that July 21st date.
Okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion to continue this until the July 21st meeting.
Second,
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yes,
I vote yes. All right.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank you. Next item on the agenda is 6 Perkins nominee trust. Anthony Barbera, 6 Perkins Way. Request for minor modification.
Anthony, this is Andy Port. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, how you doing? Can you hear me all right?
yes.
Okay, great. Patrick Seacamp, my environmental guy, was supposed to be in for the meeting. I don't know if he's with us tonight. I don't hear him, so Bill Holt couldn't make it. So we had an approval, not an approval, but I had on the plans for him to get 4 loading docks, 2 on each side of the building approved. And it came to my attention when we were doing work in the building that he said those are graded drive-in doors. And I said to him, no, they were supposed to be loading docks and they were supposed to be approved as loading docks back 2 years ago. And he said, well, no, we didn't. I said, well, you got to go back and do it because, that's what the plan was, for 4 loading docks on each side. So it's not going to change anything in the ground as far as they either drive-in doors or loading docks. So, I don't know. My guy couldn't make it because he had another meeting in Groveland, my engineer. So
I'm here.
they put me here as the owner, which I don't even know, what answers I could, what questions I can answer your.
Yeah, Bill Holt is here.
Oh,
I
okay.
am here. Yes.
Hi, Bill. All right,
How
Bill.
you doing?
The way, because
I can explain a little more if you'd like to
Okay.
hear more.
Please.
So Tony is right. We inadvertently had designed it with drive-in doors, and we obviously have corrected that now with ramps, loading dock ramps that go down towards the building. And because of that, if you look to the northeast, you'll see the first one highlighted in yellow on the right side of the building. We had to call for walls, retaining walls that will hold the soil back for the parking areas and the walkways on either side of the loading dock. Now that section of pavement, about 940 square feet, will be drained towards the building. So we installed 2 trench drains that will drain down to a newly called for drainage manhole number 6. It's actually going to be a catch basin sump, 4-foot sump with a oil and grease hood that will then drain down to the stormwater basin to sediment forebay. So that will give it to 44% treatment before it goes into the infiltration basin designed. So it'll have full treatment of that water that was normally going to be flowing towards the catch basin number 4 in the northeast corner of the parking lot, that was going to be treated through the storm scepter and then down into the sediment forebay. So this will give it the same amount of treatment. So there's no increase in impervious area. It's all the same, still remains pavement. It's just now redirected towards these trench drains as opposed to going towards the catch basin. So in this particular case, it stays the same. There's no increase in impervious area. There's no increase in the amount of work in the buffer zone. Basically, it's the same design, just now as loading docks. And then on the southwesterly side of the project, you'll see the other area where the 2 loading docks are proposed. Same situation here. In this case, we have the 2 trench drains draining to an inline manhole. The line that came out of the tension pond to the left came down into the storm scepter, and in order to install this drains into the drain line, we had to put a manhole in to make the bend. So now that will go into the storm scepter to be treated, then into the sediment forebay, into the pond. So the treatment remains the same for that as well. That's about 960 square feet of area that's flowing towards those 2 trenches. So it's not changing any of the drainage. It's not changing any of the impervious areas or the amount of work done in the buffer zone. So it really consider it a minor change, modification in the plans. So we'd like to, obviously have this approved so that he can move forward with those construction of those loading docks. If you have any other questions, I could answer them.
Okay, anything else? Get a motion?
Motion to accept this change as a minor modification?
Second.
Hey, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, next item. Tom Hughes on behalf of John Hartnett, 20 Henry Graff Road. Request for certificate of compliance. This one was 0094.
Yes, good evening. It's Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. Later on your agenda, we have a notice of intent for this site. This is the laydown area on Graff Road. I think you're all familiar with it. John Hartnett or other parties, while John has owned it, sought permits a few times. None of those permits were filed at the registry or ever fully executed. But we want to clean up the records, so we've filed a request for certificates of compliance. So the work was not done on this. This was a permit issued for an industrial building with associated parking area and stormwater. But as I stated, no work was ever done.
Okay. So
in this case, it's considered an invalid order of conditions, and that would be how the certificate of compliance would be issued.
okay.
And I will likely need to get a duplicate copy of the order so we can get it all cleaned up at the registry.
Okay, I'll have to see if I can find that in the basement. I know we don't have that in the database.
I believe I got copies of a number of things from Diane, and I think that the orders are in there. Otherwise,
Do you have copies of the orders then?
I'm not sure if I have the orders. I'll go and look on that one. I thought I
Okay.
had the order on at least one of them, but
All right.
Are there plans that go with those? I'm kind of curious how the wetland has changed.
the wetland itself looks similar. This plan was for a building about the same size as what we're proposing now. The difference is the stormwater basins are massive, and actually incorporate the swales up front.
But as far as the area is disturbed and so forth?
Yeah, the area, that all looks very similar. The one thing that didn't exist is what we have flagged along the entry to the condo complex out back. That wetland area didn't exist. That was, and that's really more of a water conveyance that connects two wetland areas rather than it's more of a swale than a wetland, but it is jurisdictional because it connects the two wetland areas. So we have new wetland that didn't exist back then.
Okay, nothing pushed in.
I mean, I didn't do a full overlay or anything, but nothing significant looks like it's really changed.
Okay, I'd be curious to see the plan sometime, but I'm glad you referenced it.
Okay. So we'll need a motion on this one.
Motion to issue a certificate of compliance as an invalid order of conditions for 5194.
Second.
Okay, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, the next one is Tom Hughes on behalf of John D. Hartnett, 20 Henry Graff Road. Request a certificate of compliance, and this one is 0510406.
Yes, similar permit issued for an industrial development. This one was a much bigger building, ran pretty much front to back the entire lot, surrounded with parking. Again, project was never executed, but was permitted, and we'll need to clean this one up as well. So again, it's an invalid order.
51406 as an invalid order of condition.
Second.
Okay, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Paul, get closer to your microphone when you're making the motion, because you're
Oh, okay.
very much going in and out. Okay, and last but not least, Tom Hughes on behalf of John D. Hartnett, 20 Henry Graff Road. Request for certificate of compliance for 0510685.
Okay, again, Tom Hughes representing John Hartnett. This one was actually for the laydown area, but the laydown area existed at the time. The commission was having some back and forth with another property in the industrial park. And John filed this to be protective of himself in case he had to go forward and actually do anything to improve the site. He got the permit, and then I guess things sort of died down with the other issues. So this was never filed at the registry, and he never executed the work on the ground. So again, it would be an invalid order, and we'd ask that that you guys issue the COC.
Okay, need a motion?
Motion to issue certificate of compliance for 51,685 as an invalid order of conditions.
Second.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right. The next item on the agenda is Tom Lawrence, 1782nd Street, request for extension.
Okay, I'm not sure if Tom is here tonight. In the meeting, I gave him the information. I think I thought he was intending to attend, but this is just an extension request, so it's not really necessary that he be here. I can explain to you what the request is if you'd like. You all might remember that this was a project that was permitted back in 2017 as an after the fact order of conditions for construction of a new deck attached to the house at the end of 82nd Street, and it was below the base flood elevation. We found out about it because a neighbor called, and the commission issued a violation and an enforcement order to Mr. Lawrence. And then when he filed the notice of intent, he proposed a good deal of mitigation in order to allow the deck to remain. So the commission voted to issue a variance to allow the deck to remain. And then he was required to do approximately, it was 437 square feet of plantings and cement removal, concrete removal, and also beach nourishment. So he brought in a whole lot of new sand. He removed the concrete that surrounded the house and was under some of the decking. And the last thing that was remaining to be done was the plantings. The permit that was issued in 2017 expires this July 2020. And so he called to ask if he could have an extension because he hasn't been able to finish the planting work yet. Apparently he had a stroke in November and has been tied up out of state and hadn't been able to get back to do that. So he asked for a 1-year extension. I was thinking that it might be more appropriate to give him a 2-year extension, just so that he can ensure everything gets in there and survives.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, you got a motion?
Motion to issue a 2-year extension for 51,971.
Second.
All right, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Can I get a motion to open the public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. First item is David Daly, Daily Group, 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane, notice of intent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street. With me this evening is Matt Hammer, not me personally, but he's on there, and David Daly and Jonathan Miller of the Daily Group, and I believe Howard Snyder is on too, who's the landscape architect. When we last met 2 weeks ago, the board had reviewed the plans and there were some changes and updates that needed to happen. Most importantly, the revised shape of configuration of lot 1. And so, Andy, if you want to scroll down so we can see the plan set that includes lot 1. There we go. So as you can see, the lot 1 was reconfigured to respect the lot line and the no disturb, 25-foot no disturb area, as we discussed. One of our hesitations at the last meeting that we couldn't say absolutely that we could do this was because we would need waivers from the planning board. And so the night after the last meeting, we went to the planning board, and the planning board understood the concerns of the commission, and they and the dog likes it too. They were favorable to this. While they haven't closed out, they still have a few more things to do. They said that they would grant the waivers on this. So there wasn't an issue with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt. I don't know, Matt, if there were any other changes on here that you needed to point out.
Thank you, Lisa. For the record, Matt Hammer, Lamplex Engineering and Surveying. No, essentially that's the change, was the reconfiguration of the lot. The grading on that lot did not change either. And we've just been doing minor changes related to the crosswalk configuration on Colby Farm Lane and some small improvements on Colby Farm Lane.
And what's happening with the playground?
So, so there has been some discussion with the city about the playground. As you all know, when we last met and for several months prior to that, there was no question that we were going to have a public playground here with the 5 public parking spaces. Last Friday, maybe it was Thursday now, they all run together. We had a conversation with Andy and Lise Reed, and because of concerns raised by Molly Attenborough, there was some concerns about traffic and children crossing into a public playground. And so David met with the DPW out there and talked about traffic calming measures. Today, I had a conversation at about 5 o'clock with the mayor regarding the playground, and she would like to have a playground, whether it be public or private there. She is concerned about the traffic calming measures. She would like to reduce the number of public parking spaces there to 2, a handicap and 1 others, just to, kind of discourage the public aspect of it, but have it potentially open to the public. We are supposed to get together some potential quotes regarding the cross lights that are like they're going to be installed up on High Street. They're solar operated, similar to what you see at on Merrimack Street down by the Gold Shawmut building, and they're now up at Low Street as well. So that hasn't been entirely solved yet. There will be something there. And the question is exactly how the traffic calming measures and safety for potential crossing is addressed. But that area is outside the is outside the resource area. I know it's a public benefit, but it's part of a myriad of public benefits we believe that we've provided and noted in our application.
So at this point, Lisa, the playground is going to stay?
That's our hope. And that was my conversation with the mayor this evening. And she just wants to make sure that we're able to provide appropriate safe crossing.
Okay, because the word that I got last Friday night was
Yep.
the playground was gone.
Yep.
So I immediately said, well, let's move the house on lot number 1 to where the playground was.
No.
Which has,
Yeah.
Benefits for everybody. Maybe some additional cost for you guys, but, get away from the wetlands, you'd remove your sewer problem, not having to put in a pump. I think everything would be in the HOA.
Well, the problem is, Steve, though, that, the way this is set up, I don't know, quite frankly, I don't know that the planning board would agree with you. this has been set up to be kind of a neighborhood and a common kind of thing.
Right.
It's purposefully been designed to have these porches out front, and then to stick another house there, which is the back and which is the front, doesn't really quite work. And you know, the neighborhood across the street, the existing houses on Colby Farm Lane, those families, they're all looking forward to a playground down here.
Oh, no, I mean, if the playground stays,
Yeah.
that's fine, but
Yeah.
if it goes away, then, you know, I'd like to see that house on lot 1 moved to where the playground was, still keeping all that open space behind it.
Right. So here's what the applicant would like to do. We believe, based upon my conversation with the mayor this afternoon, that we can make it safe, and that there will be a playground there, private or public. That's the goal. That's been what was presented for several months, and everybody has been enthusiastic about it. And so if that's not the case, then we'll have to come back and make an amendment to the Conservation Commission to an order of conditions. But this is the direction we're going in right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had one other comment. If you go back to the existing conditions page, way in the back there, there are 2 trailers that are right in the wetlands, and they appear to be on someone else's property. But I'm wondering who owns those trailers? Does the applicant own them? I mean, they're the current owners, or does the people who own the lot own those trailers?
The current owner, so I represent the buyer of the property. The current owner has the responsibility to remove all of the trailers and the contents, and there's also piles of rock and all that kind of stuff. That all is supposed to be removed from the property.
Those 2 trailers appear to be on someone else's property.
No, oh, you mean all the way in the back,
Yes, all the way in the back.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the one, nope, not those, Andy. Go to the straight back to the over
center
to your
there.
right. Go blow it back up a minute. It's if you were to enter the front of the lot and you walk directly to the back.
Top center.
Right there you go.
Yeah.
Those 2 trailers.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Steve. That's not the property that we're purchasing.
Okay. But does perhaps the current owner have put those there inadvertently? Or
I don't. I can't make a representation one way or
Lisa,
the
I can
other.
weigh in on that.
Okay.
I would presume so. Looking at evaluating the lot as it is right now with the number of trailers he has on there, I wouldn't be surprised if that belongs to the current owner/tenant. I can say, as Lisa weighed in on, the fact that everything from that site is going to be moved based on the sale of his property.
So that's David Daly, the buyer of the property, the applicant.
I had a hard time understanding him.
So what he, sorry, Steve. So what he was saying was that he presumes, again, we don't know for a fact, but he presumes that those are the current owner's trailers. And he is required under our purchase and sale agreement to remove all of those trailers from the property.
Okay.
So if they're his, he's going to have to remove them.
Okay. And if they aren't, then we need to get a hold of the current owner and get them out of the way.
You need to get Claire and Jara Hovey there, if that's who their owners are.
Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the current owners.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, but I just can't, I don't know that.
Looks like you might have another one on the next property over that's on the map 98 lot 25.
Yeah, I don't know if that's his or if it's the neighbors, because that neighbor's got some stuff going on back there too, the Campanagros. So I'm not sure whose that is either, but
okay. It just seemed unusual for so many trailers to be out there.
well, and there is one of the public benefits. I couldn't have said it better myself. We'll all be cleaned up.
Well, I'm happy with what you did on lot 1. So
Well, we appreciate the commission working with us on that, and certainly the planning board, they were definitely amenable to it as well.
All right. Andy, can we just go back and take a look at that one more time?
Yeah, sorry, what are you looking to look at on the screen?
Lot 1,
Oh, lot 1, yeah, sure.
the new lot 1.
Yep.
The build, oh, there we go.
Okay, and the new lot line will have a split rail, a round rail, or some sort of fence on it, and some marking saying do not go beyond this point.
Yeah, so on the cover letter that we provided to the board last time, we offered a number of conditions. And it was based upon our conversation, and thank you, Steve, I should have reviewed those. So one of the things was that there would be a split rail fence that would run along that lot line, and it basically says, you know, don't go beyond wetlands, resource area, something like that, whatever you want that to say. The second thing is that the same deed restriction that you have across the street on Colby Farm Lane, and I repeated it in the my cover letter to the commission, would apply to lot 1 as well as to the homeowners association, which is actually condominium on lot 2. So those conditions would be applicable to both properties. And those proposed conditions, yeah, there you go. Split rail fence delineates the property line. Those proposed conditions are in the filing I made with the commission.
Okay.
All right.
Have we seen the HOA?
No, what you did across the street was you prescribed the language you wanted, and then prior to recording the HOA, you asked to review it and approve it, which is, and you have on that one, and that is recorded. And we would assume that you would want to do the same thing, and we would do, you'd review the deed as well as the condominium association documents.
Okay.
We're fine with that condition.
I have a question on this landscape plan that is shown on the screen right now that Andy's showing. For lot 1, showing the lawn area depicted with the little grass symbols. And then there's the sort of wetland buffer conservation seed mix shown to the rear of the lot and along the rest of that 25-foot no disturb zone going further up. I guess my question is, how do you envision the homeowner managing those two areas and the difference between those two areas?
Howard, do you want to address that if you're on? So
Is Howard underneath a different name?
is there a phone number? It's Howard Snyder, and last time he called in on the phone.
No, not this evening, no.
He doesn't look like he's here.
So I don't, he had a plan, Julia, regarding that seed mix and the maintenance of the two. So, you can condition it to include a, to have an O&M plan to be approved by the commission, prior to the closing kind of thing, if you would like.
Yeah, I don't know that that's really the best way to go about it. It just doesn't seem feasible for an O&M plan to be made specific to this one lot and their landscaping. It looks to me like what's going to happen is that's just going to get mowed. It's just going to be a different seed mix than the grass, but it's just going to get mowed like the grass, or they're going to just landscape it any way they want. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. Depends on how the commission feels. The rest of the buffer zone is improved and protected, and the lot lines are changed. I just want to make sure that we're being realistic about our expectations for this site, and I don't want to get further down the road and then have people say that that should have been maintained as something other than what it is in the future.
Yeah,
I think go ahead, I apologize.
I think there's a very good chance that whoever buys that house is not going to keep it as a wetland seed mix, and they're going to have somebody come in and put grass in there.
So one of the reasons, I think that the reason we moved the lot line last time, and we asked the commission where they wanted the lot line, was to attempt to make sure that the single family house lot was clear by its delineation, and that, you know, all of a sudden people weren't taking over the wetlands and in particular the no disturb zone. So, you know, we could put interior fences again on that area, but then you've got a split rail fence along the back and then a split rail fence in the middle of the lot. I don't know. We did have a long discussion last time about where that line goes.
So I'm just wondering if there just may be a better way to do the landscaping on this lot so that it kind of is a compromise or serves both purposes. So instead of doing lawn and then this conservation mix, which essentially can just get mowed like a lawn or just replaced pretty easily, that, I mean, in general, you're improving the vegetative cover throughout the 25-foot no disturb and the whole buffer zone, which currently wasn't even fully vegetated. So I'm wondering if people would feel better about maybe at the lot line where the split rail fence is, planting some shrubs or some other things that will provide a little bit of habitat and serve as like a border, a heavierly vegetated border to the back of the lot. And then they can do what they want with the lawn area and anything in front of that.
David, are you okay with that?
Yes, I think that's a great idea.
I'm having trouble hearing David.
He said, yeah, he thinks that's okay.
This is the Jonathan Miller with the Daily Group. David's mic seems to be a little off on his laptop, but I'm speaking for him. He would be okay with planting on the other side of the split rail fence, and then ensuring that the area within the lot one would be maintained by the owner as the owner seems fit. And then on the other side, have some shrubbery that is that provides a more enhanced habitat for wetlands.
I guess one thing I was thinking of, possibly taking some of those shrubs that are around the house or something and dotting them in that wetland seed mix area as kind of a indicator that it's more of a wetland area. I can't see owners destroying shrubs in there.
So, to be clear, are you requesting they kind of sprinkle both sides of the fence?
Well, I'm thinking sprinkling the area where it says lot 1 single family dwelling with a few shrubs. I'm not saying fill the thing up.
Okay, I think I get what you're saying. All right.
Yeah, or plant along the fence line and then throw a tree in the corner or something, just to add some buffer zone plantings to within lot 1 to the area that is shown as the seed mix that will sort of last and stay and be part of the finished landscape for the homeowner. They won't have to worry about this wetland seed mix. You know what I mean?
So I think that's a great idea. And what if we did this, since Howard's on, we can't draw on this plan. What if we said before the landscaping is completed, that the commission sees the final plan regarding lot 1, and we do that
before the landscaping is completed or before the project starts work?
Either one's fine. I mean, we have plenty of time to come back in after, whatever. I think you can draft the condition however you want it. The idea is that the commission approves a final landscape plan prior to it being undertaken.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the construction schedule for this? I assume you want the benefits of using the same contractors that are across the street.
That's David. So the answer is yes. I don't know, Jonathan, do you want to? I think it's the summer. Jonathan, if you want to pipe into that.
Yes, I mean, we're still working on finalizing some of the site work next door across the street. We have 2 structures that are in the vertical stages. So we still have 12 left to go vertical, and we'd like to maintain the site work crew and the vertical crew to just transition across the street when that time is available. And there's also some site work that we would like to do at the same time on both sites. There's some, chipping of some ledge that is the efficiencies work out when the crews are already there to have to bring them back and forth.
Yeah.
Do you think there might be any contaminated soil on this site, given what's been going on there?
No, we don't think so. It's been primarily, a facility that stores vehicles that move back and forth, and there's a lot of granite rock that they do have a kind of a small granite rock sale business. But based on our review of the area, we don't feel that there's any contaminated soil.
Okay.
And
So
given this is the same crew as across the street, can we make sure they're not overrunning the siltation and fences this time?
Yes, what duly noted, and I think that was taken care of, and it's been noted for sure.
Yes, we restored that this week, and we put them on notice and our project manager to make sure that they pay close attention to that silt fence and the maintenance of it throughout the life of the project.
Joe, this is Andy Port. Just would suggest a clarification for the commission. Lisa, I thought at the last planning board meeting you had suggested that you might be looking for the developer to have lot 1 separate from the association for the rest of the development. Can you clarify that for the commission for respect to lot 1?
Yeah, no, that's exactly true. And that's what we said to the commission last week, which is why we proposed the conditions to ride the deed on lot 1 as well as in the condominium association.
The conditions to ride the deed?
Sorry, the conditions. So the conditions that we've presented, and I believe that I have in my cover letter, are that they are applicable to the deed on lot 1, and they are applicable to the condominium association documents as well.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we don't need a special condition regarding that because it's already in there.
A special condition to make sure that the proposed conditions go with the deed and both the condominium document as well as lot 1 is what we proposed.
Okay, great.
All right.
Considering the changes and so forth, the plan that we have, the plans that we have in front of us, this is the final and they're all consistent?
That's correct. Matt, you can comment on
Yes,
that.
that's correct. This is the current plan in front of the planning board.
Okay, and I mean, the whole thing with the park and everything else, there's the playground, there's a consistency in this that all says playground.
That's correct.
Okay.
But the playground may change, especially, I mean, you're going to reduce maybe to 2 parking places.
Right, and that's what I had said to the commission before, that the mayor considered potentially removing 3 of the parking spaces, only having 2. But again, we're going to revisit that tomorrow with her. So it's not in the resource area. If it changed on the plan, that would be, less gravel and more grass. So I don't know that it impacts the commission's decision.
No, I just want to make sure that when all the smoke clears here, that we have the plans that are all consistent.
Yes, David, they are.
Okay. Are we all set?
I think so.
Yeah.
Any comments from the public? Do not see any raised hands. All right. What do you want to do?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Okay, next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Michael and Karen Costello, 249, 251 Water Street, notice of intent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lisa Mead on behalf of Mike and Karen Costello, who are also on here this evening. And with me too is Tom Hughes, who's our wetland specialist on the project, as well as Eileen Graff. And Andy, do you have the plans on this?
Yeah, could you just clarify which one you want at any given point? We have a couple of plans that have been submitted. So we have the landscape plan and some others.
So I think, you know, I think for the opening, we ought to look at the architectural plans that were part of the zoning board file that was moved over to the Concom files today. There we go. That's great. You want to scroll down, that's probably the existing. This is proposed. This is fine. We can work from here. So the Costellos are here because they would like to, they recently purchased this property, 249 to 251 Water Street. And in most instances, this would not be their proposed renovations, which are generally modest, would not be a problem. However, because the property is located in the VE zone and the property is historic, the Costellos are faced with a conundrum. Take the house down and put it on pilings, or do limited renovations and protect the historic structure in the historic district, and obtain a waiver from the limitations on FEMA through the state building code. The Costellos have chosen to save the historic structure and do limited restoration and renovation. This house is currently a two-family, and they're going to convert it to a single-family home. I'm going to go into a little bit of the history on it because it's important for the commission, given your authority here. But suffice it to say that the Historic Commission has approved the renovations to the structure and determined that with the renovations, the structure continues to be historic. The ZBA has also approved a special permit for modification of pre-existing non-conforming structure, which allows for a slight upward extension on the side yard setback and a slight encroachment into the rear yard a little bit further than it already exists. The data sheet suggests that the structure was built around 1875. Unlike the present structure as a residence, it was actually the South End Gun Club. And the Newburyport Daily News archives reflect that, and not in 1875, but in fact, the structure was built in 1895. The South End Gun Club existed in 1893 and was in search of a new location. They kind of popped around town. And brothers Willard Hatch and Orlando Hatch, both prominent businessmen, built the structure. Mr. Hatch, Willard Hatch, was an assessor in the city of Newburyport. And the clubhouse opened in June of 1895. There were open porches, which you'll see Eileen is returning part of one, the front porch. And they have reading rooms and pianos and pool table and all kinds of things going on in there. Additionally, it's located in the Joppa Historic District. And I think that's probably one of the most important factors about this house and renovating it. The Joppa Historic District has a unique history, of course, as you know, not only for clamming and shipbuilding carried out here, but also because of the annexation of Joppa, the Ridge, and Belleville from Newbury as part of the creation of the city of Newburyport in 1851. So the house is also in the area between the Woodwell Shipyard and the clam shacks that once were the hallmark, of course, of Joppa Flats. So it has historic prominence, and it's in a historic prominent location as part of a historic district. And the Historic Commission acknowledged that and voted that even with or because of the renovations and restorations of part of the house, that it would continue to have that designation. Mike and Karen employed a structural engineer, Lisa O'Donnell, who you are familiar with, to review the structure of the house itself. Lisa found, as I submitted in our documentation, that the foundation itself was in good condition given its age. It was a field stone below grade and continues as a brick wall above grade. However, the more vulnerable, the brick and field stone are more vulnerable to damage than a cast in place concrete wall, which would provide more protection to the original structure of the house. And the new foundation wall would support the small addition on the rear of the structure, which Eileen will talk about in a minute. That addition is over a footprint of an existing enclosed porch. However, there's no basement or foundation beneath the porch. The new foundation would be on the water side of the existing foundation, would serve as a measure to protect against the effect of storm-driven wind, waters, and wave, according to Lisa O'Donnell. So it's important to note that FEMA and the Massachusetts Building Code have found that preservation of historic structures is significant enough to permit a waiver from the 50% rule in those instances where improvements do not take away from the historic nature of the structure or the setting in which it exists. I think we're going to talk about this later, but I certainly think that the new regulations which the Commission adopted may run afoul of the state building code in that manner. In any event, we believe that there are enough public improvements here and the preservation of the historic structure that it's something that we can work with everybody on, we hope. So Eileen, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some of the things that you've done, taking into consideration the location of the structure, the flood zone, as well as the historic nature of the property.
Sounds good. Eileen Graff Architects. So we were able to use an image of that South End Gun Club that they pulled up from archives as the sort of inspiration of the original structure and how to get this building back to some of those details. And so starting with the front elevation, we wanted to bring back the open covered porch, which had been enclosed over time. So you'll see on the front elevation, we've got the columns and a railing system there, bringing back a hip roof. It had been turned into a shed roof, and so bringing back that original roof type as well. The left side of that covered porch, we are actually going to absorb some of that space for bringing mechanicals up from the basement. Currently, they exist in the basement, and given the location and the rising tides, we're trying to bring some of the mechanicals up to a level that would be safer, more secure. So it seemed that was a good location for it there. You'll also note that the detailing, the casings, the moldings, the siding are all also trying to bring back some of that original detail on the front facade. On the right side of that front facade, you'll see the shed roof, and there is currently a structure, a sunroom, that exists there that has a subpar foundation there. So that would be rebuilt in that same footprint, leading towards, from that front face that you see there, leading towards the water side. Then on the rear elevation, you will see that there is, thank you, there is a covered porch that's happening on the water side. And so the hope there, and again, working with Lisa O'Donnell, was the idea that that covered porch could have a frost wall, a foundation wall that would, a concrete poured foundation wall that could help protect the original foundation from from the rising tides. So the idea there, it would also help with supporting the new structure above. The second floor on the rear has this peculiar cantilever, and so we are maintaining that cantilever, and that's the space you see up above the covered porch. All of this is the sort of openness and the big glass openings are happening on the rear of the building, the least visible from the public way. And our feeling is that from the historical point of view, we are trying to do all our efforts to preserve the original structure, to let that sort of come back to its original form, give it the room it needs to breathe and exist, but yet with these small additions, the side one-story piece, as well as the small addition on the rear, that those small appendages don't take away from the original structure. The third floor you'll see also is the addition of some shelf dormers to assist in much needed headroom on that top floor. But really the footprint is minimal in increase, and really shooting for preserving and restoring the original structure.
Thanks, Eileen. So Andy, you could go to Tom's presentation that he submitted today. And so while Andy's doing that, let me just say that Mike and Karen would prefer not to demolish the existing structure, but to instead renovate the two-family home and convert it to a single-family home while constructing the foundation, as Eileen indicated, to help protect the original foundation in the house. We think this is a public benefit because it's a less intense use than the current two-family use. In addition, there is an exception available under the FEMA and Massachusetts Building Code related to historically significant houses. And this house would be, there would be a public benefit of the preservation of the house in the historic district. And finally, and Tom's going to go into this a little bit, but there is a city drain line. The catch basin's right in front of the house, and it runs under the porch of the structure. And we're going to work with the city to move it out from underneath the porch, give the city an easement, and then work to make it MS4 compliant. And Tom is going to talk a little bit about that. So at this time, I think that I'm just going to let Tom go through all the details he needs to go through, and then we'll take questions, obviously.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, before we turn off the, go from the cover page, if you can look at the cover page at the image on that, you can see that the property is one that is, it's got a driveway, and then it also has a use driveway that if you look at many aerial photographs of this site, people have always parked off into the lawn back beyond the paved driveway. In addition, you'll notice that there's really no vegetation of any substance beyond lawn on this lot, or frankly, on the adjoining lots and in that whole section of Java. So now if we can just scroll down to the next page. Okay, this is a 2019 ortho photo. You can see the one piece of vegetation you can see is on the neighbor's property. But again, you can see the driveway and the house. There's an area to the left of the house that is loosely called landscape on the existing conditions plan, but really it's sparse in vegetation at best, and is mainly used as kind of a zone of curtilage around the house for folks to navigate along that side of it. If we can jump down to the next one, you'll see the Japa endangered species habitat just clips, at least from the image, clips just maybe a foot beyond the wall on the seaward side. The next one is the floodplain, and you'll see we're in the VE15, which extends all the way to the other side of Water Street and partially into the properties on the other side. Okay, the next picture, and I apologize, we did all this field work right back in the winter. And then we got hit with the COVID stuff, which delayed us getting this in. But these photos do show you the existing structure. They show you the existing porch off to the side, the cantilever in the back in the upper center. You can see the drain in front of the property is in the bottom center. On the lower left, you can see the area to the side of the house, very narrow area between the fence and the house there. In the bottom right, you can see the existing revetment. On top of the revetment, you can see the sort of these big concrete, almost Jersey barriers, but they're a lot fatter and bigger than Jersey barriers that run along the top of the revetment along that whole section of Joppa. I think we could, yep.
I have a question, and maybe it's more for Eileen than you, but if I look at the picture that's the view of the house from the seawall,
yeah,
and I can see the cantilevering, and she said you were going to maintain the cantilevering, but there's going to be a balcony attached to that, and then there's the addition underneath it. I don't quite understand
underneath it, what we're trying to do is put in a frost wall to protect the foundation behind it, and then it will just be a patio built within that. It's not going to be living space or anything. It's more of an outdoor space under expanded above. And Eileen can describe if you want more detail on what's happening above that. But
well, how far out does that cantilever, I guess, is the question. And then
the existing cantilever, maybe Eileen, can you address the size of the existing cantilever?
Sure, I sure can. So as you can see in that middle photo, that cantilever is actually 2 feet over the first floor.
Yeah.
And we're just going to extend that 2 feet to add 4 more feet above that first floor level. So that first floor level is not moving. That's not changing. It's only on the second floor level that it's going out 4 more feet.
Okay, and so the first floor is not going to extend another 6 feet, I guess.
Correct. That's
okay.
Correct.
That was my basic question.
Yeah, no, what we tried to do there is we tried to, instead of, since we had to put in the frost wall for the foundation protection, we're turning that into a patio, trying to make it so it's something the water can sort of flow through and around if it rises up above that elevation. But at least it would provide some openness and we wouldn't be expanding, living space within the floodplain.
Okay, so those 2 windows on the first floor will become all glass, basically.
Yeah. Okay. There'll be a lot of glass added to that backside. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's as far out as you're going on the first floor.
Yeah, the first floor, that back wall on the ground that you see there is not moving forward. There will be the frost wall in front of it that becomes a patio, and then the columns supporting the upper addition come off that frost wall.
Can I ask a quick question? In the notice of intent earlier in your presentation, you described that the addition on the second floor was going to be constructed over an existing enclosed porch that's on the first floor, but I don't see any enclosed porch on the first floor.
So Eileen, maybe you can address that. So Julia, the addition on the left is the enclosed porch. Go ahead, Eileen.
On the left, yes, that the enclosed porch, the sunroom, I referred to it earlier. So there's some extension above that would be part of the roof. Exactly. So Andy has a cursor right near it. So there's a little bit of railing. Yes, exactly. So there is some roof that's coming over in front of that 1-story space that you were just referring to, that sunroom. That gets extended with the 2nd-story expansion as well. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, that does. I was sort of, when I was reading through the notice of intent and looking at the plans, it was unclear to me, and it seemed as though the enclosed porch you were referring to was at the rear of the structure, not on the side. So now I understand it a little bit better. Thank you.
All right, so moving on, if we can go back into the presentation materials, and I think we can go on to the sheet after the photos. So this is the site plan. On the left is the existing conditions. and on the right is the proposed condition. And so starting with, let's start with the driveway. What we've tried to do with the driveway is take the area of lawn that continually gets ruined by people driving over it and putting a couple stripes on it. So that would be what's going on there. We are trying to contain the outdoor use of the property better within a couple patios, and then surround that area with a lot of nice landscape native vegetation. There's a landscape plan we'll get to in a little bit. The other element that there's detail on the next sheet, but we will be replacing the storm drain connection through the property, and doing that in cooperation with the city. You know, upgrading the infrastructure, and also importantly, as Lisa mentioned, providing the city with an easement so that it's actually a legal outfall, and all of that. Steve Sawyer has worked with the city engineer to make sure that it's going to be compliant with MS4, et cetera. We're really reducing the amount of lawn on property, which for, you know, Mike and Karen makes the maintenance a lot easier. But also from an environmental point of view, we're adding an awful lot of habitat in an area that is kind of devoid of it in terms of terrestrial habitat. Obviously, once you get into Joppa, there's beautiful habitat out there. Along the seawall, that upper section of seawall, there's no drainage or no filter fabric, so that essentially along that section of Joppa, you get sinkholes behind there. So what we're trying to do there is we're actually going to dig a fairly shallow excavation and put in some filter fabric and then backfill over it. There's a detail for that on the next sheet that we can get to when we do that. All told, we're with the patios and the reconfigurations of driveway, and making sort of more of a formal path along the left-hand side of the structure, we're adding about 885 square feet of alteration that is you know, hardscape and patio, et cetera. You know, the building expansion, I think is modest in terms of when you look at the numbers that are on the plan sheet. And then we're doing about 650 square feet on the rear of the you know, on the water side of the structure in vegetation. So we're really adding a pretty significant buffer in there. And if we can go to the next sheet, we can look at some of the detail on the wall work and the drain line work.
Before you leave that, I just had a
Yeah.
couple of questions.
Sure.
On the driveway, in one place you call it proposed pavers or cobbles, and in another you say reconstruct as paver or bit concrete. Which is it?
I believe the main driveway is the main part of it. I think was intended to be an option, and they hadn't fully decided. I think they were leaning maybe towards bit concrete, and I think that the stripes. I'm trying to look for those notes to see where.
Yeah, the stripes. So the stripes are proposed granite. Are proposed pavers.
Right.
And the current driveway is already bit concrete, and it does say, David, you're correct, either reconstruct as paver or bit concrete. So I think
in another place it says proposed pavers or cobbles.
No, I think that's pointing over at the very bottom of the driveway near Water Street. That's pointing over to the sidewalk leading up to the front door.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think they want the ability to do pavement where the pavement is, but the extensions would be something a little bit more pervious.
It's misleading because of the hatching of the area.
Yeah.
Makes it look like it's all paver.
Right. It's a slightly different shade, but it doesn't really come through. Yeah, it was a busy plan.
Probably
you know,
made it larger or something.
Yeah, and it might be clarified a little bit when we look at the landscape plan, which is.
Before you get off this sheet, also on the cross section above this,
Okay.
Andy, higher up, there's a section.
Andy? Andy, can you scroll up a bit?
Yeah, there you go.
Yep, yep.
Okay, I had a couple of questions about this. Let's see. To the right of where you are, Andy, send it a little further. Okay, the first floor elevation is 13.9, but where you're showing the first floor is below that. You see the note that says first floor 13.9?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't, the way you show the existing first floor is below that. It's like 13.2 or something.
Okay, Eileen, can you answer the question with regard to that? What's the first floor elevation supposed to be set at?
Right.
Or what it's kind of dictated by what it is, right?
So I have on my note that the existing first floor elevation is 13.9, David.
Yeah, so the drawing's off is the
Yeah, it's
problem.
not showing right on the drawing.
So we'll have
Yeah, no,
Everett-
I see what you're talking about, and it does look like the leader is pointing to 13.9, but what appears to be the first floor looks like it's drawn too low.
Right.
Yeah, no, I see that.
And
The leader is pointing to the right spot.
so everything's coming up. I don't know if that's going to impact your grading or not. It's probably going to be more grading going on back there.
We're trying to do very minimal grading. We were trying to respect, to the extent we really could, your new regulations, and really trying to minimize what was happening in the floodplain.
Right. And that was what led me to this, because if I'm not, depending on what this drawing really is, everything's going to be lifted about 3/4 of a foot. Like you might be looking at another step or something else. I don't know.
Yeah, we can make sure to provide you with a cross section that's got those elevations actually sketched out, correct?
But what started all this was I was looking at what the actual flood elevation was, and the way it's drawn, it improves things significantly. Also, and if you go to the left on this one, okay, you have okay. I know that one, just a note there, you refer to figure 4, it's actually figure 5. I guess I'm concerned, and I don't want to mess up your presentation here. It just sounds like you're going to the next page. I'm just concerned about the amount of filling that's going on here because of that additional 3/4 of a foot.
So David,
we can just table that for now.
Yeah, David, I think that's a good point, and we'll have Everett clean this up so that it's clear what's happening, because the fill is limited. So we'll make sure that that's clear.
Okay.
Right. I think the bulk of the grade change goes with the section that's designed to protect the foundation. And then I think the only other thing is that there are areas where you get a little bit of ponding when there's rainwater. And with the new drain line, the city is okay with us putting a small area drain in the yard as well, because it's a little bit of rainfall that comes not just from this property, but from some of the surrounding areas. It tends to pond and gather a little bit there. So I think what we're trying to do there is there's the survey picks up a little bit of the sink that's going on in front of that seawall, and we're just trying to restore that roughly to where it is. We're really trying to work with the existing grade, and trying to not, have this.
I appreciate that, and I think that's what you have to do. The drain lines, the drain collections, because you're putting in little basins here. I was a little bit concerned that those might get backed up under a storm where you're actually sending water into the site.
Well, I mean, that could happen, but ultimately there are storm drains all along Water Street that are in the same circumstance. So no matter what we do in the backyard, you know, those storm drains out on Water Street are not much different in elevation than what you see for the elevation of the yard. So,
Well, the only difference is now you've created an opening where the water would go if it was being sent back.
yeah, I mean, I think so. If we had a flood that got up on the other side of the wall, it would have a place to drain out.
Yeah,
So
that
it would
would
actually
be the problem side. It would be the other side where you'd actually be sending water into the site that wouldn't actually get over the wall.
Well, I mean, we could look at, and I can talk to Steve about whether we can put some type of a flapper in there, but I think,
all you
those
need
things
is
tend to
just
be problematic.
not really. I mean, all you're doing is putting a piece of steel to hang on to the outlet that would stop it from going, to make it so you couldn't go backwards into this.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. I think because the area is so flat, I think you can do that all you want. There are gaps between those blocks, and I think if the water gets up there, it will find its way in. But it's going to be, in most circumstances, it's going to be a slow seep, and we don't want to do anything to speed that up. So we could certainly put in a gate.
David,
Well, I'm not going to try to design this. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we can I can
David,
talk.
we
to
talked,
Steve.
yeah, when we met this winter, when Mike and I and Steve and Jamie met out there this winter, we did talk about that, particularly with the tidal issues. So we can give you more information on that, because that they are looking at that for sure.
Okay.
While we're looking at this, it looks like there are two proposed foundations. There's one.
Eileen, can you describe how that
Sure.
there's that crawl space label and all that? Can you talk about how that works?
Correct. So if we start from the seawall, just so we can all orient the same way, the first line of that proposed foundation is the same line as the column row. So that's really sort of enclosing the patio space, the covered porch. Exactly. And then the next line in is the support wall to hold the original structure, that wall on the first floor that's not moving. So that's that next layer of structure.
Okay,
So I think what's confusing is the label proposed crawl space.
That did not, because that has a subpar existing foundation wall. You could see it in the house, that whole that's actually 5 feet from the original structure, the original foundation moving towards the water. That's a 5-foot zone. In rebuilding it, we don't need a full basement there. So that's simply just to get to the frost level, and thus the crawl space there. So that's what that is.
Is that first floor cantilevered out from the foundation?
No, currently no. It has its own foundation, but it's just failing. And if you're inside the house right now, that whole 5-foot zone is probably out another 3 inches from the original structure. It starts to tip down.
So that right side proposed foundation is replacing a current one?
Correct, yes.
But it's out further. I mean, you had said previously that the first floor where the windows were is where it was going to be.
That's correct. So what's confusing is the end of the original structure, the gable structure, ends at that full basement zone, the furthest to the right there. And then at some point they added this 5-foot zone on. So, and when they added it wasn't properly done. Therefore, that's why we see failure in the framing. But that exists. That wall where the notation that says first floor wall, that line is the current facade that's closest to the water. We're not changing that in any way in its location.
That's the porch, the covered porch that's beside the driveway? Is that what we're talking
No,
about?
This is the face. Well, sir, that's the same line. That's correct, if that's what you meant.
It's the
But
back wall.
It's
It's
the
the
back
back wall
wall.
of the back of the house.
Yeah. So I think at one point you mentioned those two windows
Right.
become bigger glass. That's that same wall.
Okay, so
So
the
the
existing historic foundation is somewhere under the main portion of the house.
Right.
And then there's this other first floor foundation. Is that,
Let's call that it's an intermediate foundation sometime between 1895 and now.
Correct.
And
that got added.
so that thing labeled as the first floor wall is the wall that has two windows in it?
Correct, in those photographs.
And lines up with the porch on the side.
Okay. So that proposed foundation actually exists currently?
There is a foundation there, but it's footings, it's depth, etc. There's failure there. So that's what we're replacing in the same location.
And then the other proposed the proposed foundation closer to the water is supporting a patio?
Correct. That's a new line, a new foundation wall to
And
keep
how-
that patio in place.
How deep does that go? Is that
Just to frost level so it won't heave.
And that's where the posts from the upstairs extension go from, right?
Correct.
so that from the distance between those two proposed foundations is 6 feet, is that correct?
10 feet.
Because of the cantilever, Steve.
You got,
but
you got a
the
4 foot.
cantilever comes out 2 feet, and then you were going to extend
4
another 4
feet.
feet. So I don't know how you get to 10 feet.
And then there's a 4-foot balcony beyond the living space on the second floor.
The last sheet of this, Andy, is the architecturals. I wonder if it would be helpful right now to look at the side view.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and can I just interject too, because I have a question. On all of this presentation, I haven't seen something that was mentioned in the notice of intent. So I've been confused because I thought that there was an addition at the first floor being proposed, because in the NOI, it states that there's going to be a mudroom expansion constructed with a breakaway structure on the first floor. So I've been looking for that, and I haven't been able to. We haven't covered that. Something that's not happening.
Right.
So
I'm
where is
wondering.
it?
I'm wondering if that sounds like that might have actually been holdover language from that I need to correct in the narrative, because I don't think we're doing a mudroom expansion.
That's correct.
Right. No, that
And no breakaway walls.
since this was so similar to that other project we did on Water Street, I started with that narrative as my starting point. So I apologize. That you can omit.
So
There is
there's no, just confirm for me, there's no first floor addition anywhere on the footprint, nowhere.
No, I think the only thing, and Eileen, correct me if I'm wrong, the only
Yes.
thing on the first floor is on that front porch where it's opening up, then enclosing a utility room off to the side, which is currently an enclosed like 3-season porch, but it would be
It's
turned into more of a
Yeah,
utility
actually,
room.
could I add where there is a small change in footprint? So if you're looking on the top left drawing, the front elevation, that 1-story shed roof area has a double door there with storage. And what that's depicting is a storage area intended for garbage cans, etc. And the idea there, and then if you turn to the second drawing and look at the side elevation of that one-story space, you'll see there's a little dash line there. That's the original, thank you. That's the original location of that sunroom space. We needed to create some sort of shed storage ability without having a freestanding structure out there, with the idea that we're trying to put something that can enclose these things safely, that won't be objects that will get thrown around in tidal surges and such. So we felt like that was a safe area, looking away from the water to enclose a space. So that is the only change on the first floor, and intended for simply just storage needs, a shed-like storage.
But that side addition exists and it's just being changed. So it's not.
Is it being changed or is it being expanded? It looks like there's a dotted line. It's extending out past that dotted line. I just want to confirm because this wasn't at all clear in the narrative.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Eileen. You can
Sure.
explain.
It is being extended towards the street by 3 feet, but the side that's along the driveway does not change in its location at all. So it's
okay.
Just,
and
does that help?
Is that 3 foot extension? Is that a new foundation as well in that location?
Correct.
Okay,
So it would have been good if that was in the notice of intent.
I'll correct that language. And
what's the dotted line that goes right down through the window on that side shed?
That helps demonstrate the original structure behind. So that'll help, hopefully that helps answer the earlier question with that shown crawl space area. That's what that is. So there you can see where the original foundation comes down, and yet as you travel 5 feet towards the water, that's the addition that was done, whenever, but not the original structure.
So where's the cantilevering in relationship to that dotted line?
Sure. So the cantilevering, if you go above that pure square window, right above that are 3 windows there.
Yeah.
And 2 feet of that, if you're going from that dashed line, is the existing cantilever. And so then we're extending another 4 feet. I'm sorry, I might have misspoken there. Well, you're going 2 feet from the back line of the 1-story space. So go out 2 feet and then another 4 feet. So 6 total on the second floor towards the river. Thank you.
so the right-hand side of the shed 1-story structure is the existing back line of the house at grade.
Correct. And again, reiterating, the covered porch is 10 feet total. So 2 feet of that overhang is already existing, and we're only going 4 feet more of living space, and then leaving an open area of 4 feet just for a balcony.
Okay, so, all right, there's no expansion of living space on the first floor, correct?
Correct.
And then, so you've got that wall that's going to become all glass, and extending 2 feet over that on the second floor is the cantilevering of the existing structure.
Correct.
And then how many feet are you adding on of living space?
4 feet on the second floor.
Okay. And then 4 feet of balcony?
Open balcony, correct.
Okay. Which I guess gives us the 10 feet. All right. It's just all kind of confusing. I'm having a hard time really visualizing it. But.
Well, the house, I mean, I think it's valid confusion, Steve. I mean, the problem is the house was added onto in various odd ways that doesn't necessarily make sense nor match what the existing walls were. And so Eileen and Mike and Karen tried to use that to the extent they could.
I think I might like a site visit to just go out and you know, and if things could be staked out, you know, this is this, and then what it's going to be, it might help me visualize and see what we're doing. But
Sure. I mean, I think we're waiting on something anyway, and we need to make some corrections. So maybe Tom can finish his presentation and then we can
Yes.
figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, going through, again, with this project, we have the house renovations, which are they're sort of difficult to describe in a narrative fashion, which is clear in terms of like all the little nuances that are going on. But we've really tried to keep everything that's expanding up above. And there's some minor things that the little area that Eileen just pointed out, I guess, that is on the roadside of that shed thing. But basically, we've tried to keep the structure expansion out of the flood elevations and up above, and then try to deal with things in ways that minimize any grading, and then we've got the drain replacement that we're doing on top of all of that, and we're also doing the drainage layer, you know, filter fabric on the back side of the seawall, on the landward side of the seawall, where sediment is being lost out into Joppa Flats, which obviously, you know, we really don't want sediment doing that. It's not good in terms of folks' property, and it's also not good for the flats. So, you know, overall, I mean, I think what we're doing on site is a pretty thoughtful way of dealing with this sort of difficult property with the historic structure. An area that really, most of what we're looking at is degraded riverfront. And then the parts that aren't degraded technically under, you know, under the Rivers Act are at least, you know, previously altered and low functioning. I mean, there's certainly pervious lawn, but there's no habitat value, and we're improving that. So I think there's a lot of benefits. I think I'd like to maybe go down to the landscape plan, which I think is before this, just before this.
Here we go.
So, yeah, so this is a landscape plan. You can see, you know, all the detail that went into to coming up with what's shown on the site plan. There's a lot of information here on the plants. You can go through, and then the next sheet is actually the formal plant list that goes with this. But ultimately, what you end up with is you end up with a site that, you know, it's on the water. It's still going to be a beautiful place for Mike and Karen to go out and spend some time. But at the same time, we're kind of giving a lot back in terms of creating a buffer that has some value. So I think it's a really good plan for the site. And, you know, whatever we can do to help you guys better understand what's proposed, see the site, and, you know, move this forward, we'd be happy to do. So with that, maybe I can turn, unless you guys have questions, turn it back to Lisa, and then we can take questions and discuss.
Thanks, Tom. I just did want to point out, David Vine, this plan is clear about the driveway. So you got,
I was looking at that.
So I think, so it now makes sense. And I think we'll just make it clear on the other one, but because the lines are different here, it's clearer. So I think that's it. You know, obviously I think that we're waiting on Natural Heritage. I think, is that right, Tom?
Yeah, Natural Heritage is one of those agencies that has suspended their time periods, and
right.
You know, we are technically exempt, but we're not exempt from the 30-day review, and they have not gotten back to us, and they've suspended the 30-day part of the 30-day review. So, which means we hear from them.
Tom, also there were some EP comments. Just one comment, which is that they wanted you to submit the riverfront area.
Yeah, so I did. I sent an email in. You probably haven't seen it. it was late today. You're copied on it. So under what I did is I don't know that they saw the table, and I'm not sure that they noticed that the left-hand panel was existing conditions, and it is a busy plan. So you look at it and you kind of, you know, it looks like more than what it really is. And so we pointed out that under 1058-4, the Rivers Act allows 10% or 5,000 square feet of a grandfathered lot. This is certainly grandfathered. In fact, I think it predates any environmental regulation of any significance. And we're doing 885 square feet of alteration of riverfront for the patios, for the home, you know, including the cantilever part, or you know, or the second floor part, the driveway reconfiguration, and all that. And then we're doing 650 square feet of vegetative alteration. So even if you add those together, we're at 1,500 square feet, which is well below the 5,000. And I think we also would qualify for permitting under 310-58-5, which is for degraded riverfront. But I think typically in the report, what we've done on single family home renovation and replacement is typically gone to the 1058-4.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure that that was getting taken care of.
Yeah, no, so I replied, I don't know who the analyst is, but I asked Jim Freely to forward it on.
Okay, yeah, there's a new analyst there. The other thing is this landscape plan still shows driveway as asphalt or pavers.
Right.
If that's really a choice, which it looks to be a choice, clearly pavers would be better. We're dealing with the V zone. We're dealing with adding impervious surface to the V zone. I know you're adding also a lot of new plantings over lawn, but in general, you're adding impervious surface to the V zone. And so changing that driveway to pavers would be a really important improvement, I would think.
Right, so we'll talk, yeah, we'll put that on the list for sure, Julie. I had already written that down, given the earlier discussion for next time.
Julia, Mike Costello, and thanks for taking the time, everybody, to review this plan. And Lisa's probably cringing. No lawyer wants to hear another lawyer talk. But I will just say, we plan on doing pavers there too. So if that's something we've got to commit to, we're happy to do it. We're trying to make it as environmentally friendly as possible.
Yeah, I think it'll make an important statement too, that's what you're doing in that location.
Yeah, so we can update the plans. Yeah.
Yep.
I had another question on your sheet 6, Tom, in your presentation.
Okay.
It
So
showed
page 6 of the 10.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yep.
And Andy, could you blow that up a little bit, just where the building is?
Yeah, we'll do. Just clarify if you want anything further than that.
Yeah, no, that'll do it. Okay, I'm confused by all these dashed lines. What am I looking at with these dashed?
Okay. So I think, are you talking the dashed lines within the building?
Yeah.
So I think what you're looking at, the dashed line, and Eileen can jump in if I'm wrong, but the dashed line, I believe, is the current rear wall of the structure at the ground level. And then what you see above that is the existing cantilever, maybe.
Okay, so it's not. So that's exactly what it is. It's the dashed line is the outer part of the building. Presently.
Right, I think it's at first floor.
Ground. Yes.
At ground, and then at the front you see the same thing where we're opening up the porch. It's basically to represent where the ground level wall would be.
But then the one that's saying enclosed 1-story mechanical building doesn't seem to be consistent.
Right. So I think what that is, I think he's showing what is, because since this is the proposed, I think whatever it was trying to convey is what the limit of the structure at the first level will be. So what you see two outlines. One outline is the open part of the structure is beyond the dashed line. So on the street side, the right-hand side is an open porch, and on the left-hand side, it's a mechanical. So the dashed line is showing you where the wall of the house at the back of the open porch would be. And then on the water side, you're seeing where the first floor wall is and will be in that dashed line.
Okay, so now the dashed line is where the proposed existing wall is?
Right. So on the top, it's the same, right? We're not moving that wall on the water side. On the side towards the street, we are getting rid of the sort of 3-season kind of, calling it a wall is a little polite, but it is a wall with windows, a 3-season porch on the front. So we're getting rid of portions of that, and Eileen's done some nice design work with those columns to make a nice open porch on the street.
I'm just saying that that this plan should be easier to understand.
Yeah, David, I think you raise a really good point. So both the section and the driveway, now that we know what we're going to do, and these walls, we should clean them up so that the record is clear.
Right. I think the other thing we could do that might help, David, is we normally don't give you the sort of full architectural stuff, but maybe we can give you the architectural foundation plan part of it.
Well, I'm only reacting to what I see here, and I see
absolutely
different. Yeah. Even the dashes are different, so
yeah, no,
it should be called out at least, or else eliminated if it's not consistent.
I think Everett just got excited about doing all kinds of different things with his machine there. I don't know what he was doing.
Okay.
So looking at this, is the drain line going to go under the existing first floor on the?
No, that's where it is now. It's going to be moved over to the right, David. Excuse me, Steve.
Okay.
So see, it says proposed 18-inch drain in the middle of the drive, well, to the right of the drive a little bit. And it's being removed from, it says drain line to be relocated by City of Newburyport.
Yeah.
That's being moved. That's where it is now.
Okay.
Right. If you look down in the street, I think, and Andy, if you can scroll down just a touch more, there's a leader to it. There's a big D with a circle. We're proposing a manhole there. So basically what's going to happen is the two drains will go into the manhole, and then the drain line will run down the center of the driveway. And the city, I think, likes that better because if they have a problem with the line, they don't have to go under a house to fix it.
Yeah, Steve worked with John Eric on this.
Okay. Before we sort of move on, I'm thinking that this project, regulatory-wise, is going to need variance from our local land subject to coastal storm flowage regulations, because although it got this, the waiver or the exemption or whatever it got from the state building code flood zone, we don't have that provision for a waiver or an exception for historic structures in our regulations. And so our regulations, the performance standards state that activities proposed within the velocity zone are likely to have an adverse effect on protected interests and therefore prohibited unless the applicant proves with a preponderance of credible evidence that the proposed activity and resultant alteration will not have an adverse effect on said interests. And the activities include construction or placement of new structures, including building sheds, garages, additions, or substantial improvements to existing structures supported on solid foundations below the base flood elevation plus 2 feet. So I think that I know that you got the exemption, but it looks like we need a variance unless you can prove with the preponderance of credible evidence that this will not have an adverse effect on the interests of the velocity zone. And I'm thinking that I know the notice of intent went through a lot, but it did not show with a preponderance of credible evidence that there will not be an adverse effect on said interest. So you either have to boost that up a little bit or you need to request a variance. Does anybody agree or disagree with that?
that is one of my biggest issues with this at this point, that a lot of the backyard, which is grass now, is going to be converted into hardscape with several essentially vertical walls in the form of steps. And I'm definitely not convinced that it will not significantly alter the flow of water, particularly in the form of overwash and spray during storms. Because that right now that grass is, I'm sure it gets flooded, but the water that comes up over that wall, for the most part, stays there. Where now we're proposing all sorts of hardscape, where it's going to come up, probably splash on that middle patio, and then hit the stairs going up to the porch and take off from there. And I'm personally going to need some sort of documentation from a professional engineer disabusing me of that notion. But without that, I certainly wouldn't vote for a variance for this area.
Joe, and what Joe just said, in this section of regs under V zone, another one of the prohibited activities is number 9, which states new activities that and uses that change the physical characteristics of the land, dredging, dumping, moving vegetation, removing and transferring loam, sands, or other material land, interfere with land or migration sources in response to sea level rise, interfere with natural drain, tidal pattern, etc. So those things need to get addressed, like Joe's saying. They weren't adequately addressed in the notice of intent. So if they can be addressed, they should be.
Yeah. Along those lines, on the portion that you're describing, the 10-year storm, and you said there is no 10-year storm data, and then you abruptly ended the sentence. It looks like it was just a mistake, but I think you have to go into the study to get what the 10-year versus the 100-year.
No, I've been in the study. The FEMA studies don't give you 10-year for coastal flood. They give it for inland.
They don't.
So there's no 10-year data for coastal. If you can find it, I've poured through the flood insurance studies. I've checked with a few people, and they just don't provide it. They only provide it on inland.
I think certain locations have it, and particular coastal locations don't have it determined.
Okay, well, you probably want to straighten out that last sentence that you wrote there, because I'm sure that's not what you wanted to end with.
So we will address these issues. We will address these issues before your next meeting.
Great. I mean, as you know, these regulations are new for us, and so they're sort of precedents. So we need to make sure we cross all the T's and dot all the I's on this. And right now, we just haven't done that yet.
Hey, Julia, can I ask a layman's question? And I heard Joe's concerns. He sees the porch, and then he sees the blue mist patio, I imagine, and the other patio. And I think I commend kind of the team we put together. I didn't intend when we bought the property to bring on, I feel like Warren Zevon, send lawyers, guns, and money to rebuild this thing. The house in general is just, if you walk through the door, it's in such disrepair that even if we were held to the FEMA standard, I don't think anyone could buy it and live in it and because we're able to successfully kind of argue, as Lisa did, with the historic and understanding the public policy behind keeping it historic, we made that decision that we would try to keep the house rather than take it down and maybe build something that was going up. Might have been a little bit cheaper for us to do that with a little less design, and we understand the risks having dealt with public policy most of my life and coastal zone. And David, I think we've spent many days at the beach rebuilding the beach. So I feel like we understand that. We put a lot of time and effort into the drainage out front, trying to work the side drain with the city. Clearly we're willing to work with, to do whatever we need to do in terms of the porch and the patio. And I don't want to make concessions that Lisa will kill me for later or anything like that. But, if need be, if those are the areas where you need to make sure wash can go under and maybe it's not the idea was we put that wall to protect the house in front of the porch, but we could easily have cantilevered a porch or something to that effect. Those are options we could look at too. But I just want to say, I appreciate you guys taking a look. It's complex. It's a small property, an old property, a very sensitive part of town. We knew we were in this for a little bit of a long haul. The timing, as everyone knows, is somewhat essential for us. COVID is, I commend you for getting on a Zoom, and I've been through more Zoom meetings myself and both for permitting. So it's an amazing time that we're in to handle city business. But as we're hitting all sorts of delays. So the path of least resistance for us will be the path we like to travel. So Joe, if you've got issues that maybe the site visit, we can discuss those. And if it comes to changing some of that design out back, keeping it grass, maybe not making the patios, the patio and the fire pit, but keeping them sort of more natural. We're up for that too. I'll just have to, I'll eat the cost of these, the great design she put together with the Virginia Rose and the Inkberry and the rest of it. Things I never even heard of before. But with that, thanks for taking the time and look forward to working with you to try to get this done.
Thank you.
And I do want to add one thing in terms of thinking, Joe, about how the water comes up here. What you do have to look for, and what I'd suggest you look at in the site visit, is the wall on the seaward side actually comes up above grade quite a bit. So any wave that would normally wash up and splash up against the walls and the patio the way you're talking about is actually going to get broken up, I think, by that concrete seawall. And it's more going to be water coming down almost vertically. It'll hit that concrete wall, kind of rise up and then rise back down or fall back down onto the property, as opposed to being flowing at that point. During a 100-year flood, you end up, so you can see how that's much above grade there. So you're not really going to have a flowing dynamic in the smaller, the smaller storm events. Obviously, when you get to a 100-year storm and you're in the VE zone, the entire building is in the VE zone. And at that point, whether we do this work or not, the building is there. But during those storms that were just, that I think you're talking about, where you get the water that comes up and runs along the ground and then kind of wants to run itself out and hits a wall and splashes up vertically. I don't think there's going to be a lot of running because of the existing seawall.
Well, there may be not a lot of running, but there is going to be a lot of ponding, and it's wind driven. It's what I'm talking about. I've seen, a lot of the flooding that happens, particularly just down the road at the corner there. I don't remember what street V's into it, but a lot of that comes from oversplash, and it's wind driven. So it's making up over the wall. The waves splash and a ton of water gets pushed over by the wind, and then the water moves in and can hit hard surfaces and just get re-airborne, and instead of landing on the grass and staying there.
Yeah, I think the area you're talking about, if I'm right, is a granite wall that's more flush. But why don't we look at that when we're on site? Because I think you'll see it would be a different dynamic here, and we certainly will provide more information, and we'll look at what we could do to enhance the design to try to minimize any kind of effect like that.
Okay.
So do you guys want to do a social distancing site visit? If so, when?
Pretty much any time is good for me.
Yeah, other than tomorrow's, anytime is good for me. It's going to be sunny for the next 10 days, I think, so.
Yeah, we'd like to do it soon so we can update information, but we do need a day or two to get some stakes in the ground.
How about Friday morning?
I don't know why I can't make it.
I'm no good until I'd say 10:30.
Yeah, and I'm no good on Friday morning either.
I have a call from 8:30 to 10, so anytime after 10, I could definitely do.
And I've got a meeting at 10.
How about Thursday afternoon?
Thursday.
It's fine with me.
What
Okay with me.
What time are you thinking?
3 o'clock-ish?
Thursday at 3. Hold on.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it, but I just can't. I
David,
don't-
you can walk by there anytime though, right?
Yeah, I can do most days.
I know.
I can do Thursday at 3.
All right, why don't you schedule it, and if I can make it, I will, and if not, I'll figure something else out.
All right, so we'll get stakes out there best we can, okay?
Yep.
David,
Mike,
feel
that's
free-
okay?
Yeah, sure. And David, feel free if you can't make it and you want to walk out there, feel free just to go back and take a look.
Okay.
Dan, Paul, and Steve, can you make it on Thursday at 3?
I can make it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, I should be good with that.
Great.
Where are we going to park around there?
Frank Cousins' house.
Not on the lawn.
Yeah, park on Frank's house. You can park up on Union Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Marlboro, or the car, it will take right now three or four cars, and then Marlboro Street is
Yeah.
2 or 3 down.
Okay. With that, are we done for today?
We'd request a continuance to your next meeting, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I just need to see if anything from the public.
Yep,
Anything
sorry.
from the public? Well, seeing no raised hands, I will say no. Okay. We're looking to continue to the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yeah.
David Vine.
Yes.
I vote yes.
And that's June 2nd, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item is Holly McDonald, 468th Street, notice of intent. They have requested another continuance.
Okay. To what day?
Was it the next meeting, Julie?
Yeah, it was, they requested to continue to June 2nd.
Make a motion to continue this till June 2nd?
Second.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, next item is John Hartnett, 20 Henry Graff Road, Jr., notice of intent.
Okay, this is Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. I'll turn your attention first to the agenda correction. This one is not John Hartnett. This is actually Roy Catignani, representing Sports Medicine North. He's with Conserve Group Incorporated as the applicant. Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. With me is Brad McKenzie, the engineer on the project. I will run through some things with you guys real quickly, turn it over to Brad, and then have him go over some of the site engineering details and some of the response to the engineering comments we received during peer review on the planning review process. So in this image right here on the cover sheet, you can see the current state of conditions and the lot limits. It's currently used as a laydown yard along the access road to the condominiums that are out back. Wetland vegetation, hydrology, soils exist within a swale-like, very gentle swale-like feature that I'm not sure if it was planned, but it certainly has formed on the site side of that access way. And it drains a portion of the wetlands that you can see in the upper left, which is a sort of field of Phragmites. That it drains a portion of that area down into the swale system up along Henry Graff Road. There's swales really on all four sides. The swales in the rear of the property have widened out into a broader wetland area. I think they've likely just clogged up over the years. And then the swale at the bottom, just off site, there's sort of a nice big open wetland area with some native vegetation present in and amongst the invasives on that side. So if we can go to the next page, that's just USGS map, just shows you where the site is located. The next page is the USGS, I'm sorry, the 2019 ortho photo. Again, kind of shows you the existing conditions. You can see sort of more clearly the wetland areas, and I would say sort of the highest value wetland area around the site is that area in the lower left. There's an area in the bottom right that looked to me like it might have been an old detention basin, but I could find no plans to support that. It may also just be where the filling stopped in the past. This area was actually the area where it looked like, hangars might be too polite a word, but the outbuildings associated with the old airport appear to have been right here. Where the condo road is essentially where the runway was for the old airport, and this area has been, used for non-agricultural purposes probably longer than most of the other areas in the industrial park. Okay, if we can go to the next one, that's going to be the site photos. You can kind of see big wide open dirt surface, really no vegetation except at the very perimeter along and associated with the swales. The entry along Graff Road, there is a big willow there, but other than that, it's mostly invasive species with a swale, and then there's a little bit of a shelf off the swale. A portion of that had hydric soils and wetland vegetation, and a portion of it did not. You'll see that on the flags. I think you guys are familiar enough with the site. We can probably move on to the next slide. So this, I put this out of order of what's in the plan set. This is the proposed project and kind of gives you the landscape details that we've proposed. The lighter green areas are the treatment areas, and Brad will go into more detail on those later, but they're going to be seeded with a conservation mix. The darker green areas we're going to be seeding with a wildflower mix to kind of go along with that. Both seed mixes had wildflowers in them, and both areas will now begin to provide both stormwater treatment to a site that currently has none, but also some habitat value, some pollinator value as well. Within those greener areas, we're going to be doing some fescue lawn and some native trees. We've worked some trees into the island and trees and shrubs along the bottom of the site there. You can see right up along the slope that kind of leads to the more valuable wetland down there. We're putting a lot more sort of woody vegetation along that line.
Tom?
Yes.
How are you defining the line between the grass to be mowed and, let's say, the wildflower mix? Because, I mean, it's a good plan, but the execution of the plan when the guy with the lawnmower gets out there is something entirely different.
Right. Well, so we can think and we can work out some way to mark that off. On the I guess it's the north of the image, or the top of the image. All that light yellow is all stormwater area. So that's going to be maintained as stormwater. So that line is going to be fairly distinct. And I think the grading lines are also going to be fairly distinct. Essentially what you're going to have is your parking area and kind of a couple feet so that vehicles can overhang. And then I think your grades are going to drop off. So I think it's going to be with the change in grade that really helps you set the sort of limit of mowing. They're not really going to want to go any further with the mower than those limits. In areas where, where there might be some confusion, we could certainly either place plants in a location to really make it clear, like on the bottom, we've got a lot of plants going in kind of along that line that will help us sort of demarcate that area a little bit better, and it will be surrounded with the meadow mix there. But
Yeah,
the idea is the fescue is sort of being used in those areas right next to the building that are really going to be sort of more associated with, when you walk out of the building, just a lawn area to kind of be right there, but also an area for vehicle overhang. We don't want to have something like a wildflower that's going to be tall and get up under people's cars. So it's a really limited area. And if the commission feels we need something to mark or demarcate between those areas, we can certainly talk about that. But again, I think, and Brad, when we get into the grading and site plan, I think Brad can show you sort of how the grade changes along those areas. And then, and speaking of which, I think what I'd like to do now is we kind of are now getting to the plans. I'm going to walk you through quickly where the wetland boundaries are on the next plan, and then turn it over to Brad. So actually, I think we need to go one more. So here's the existing conditions plan. Along the roadway, you can see where the existing entry is. To both sides, there's a short section of swale before it flares out into wider wetland area. And then the wetlands kind of run along the side of that access to the condos out back, loop around behind the structure, and right off property is the parking lot for the adjacent building. The wetlands have essentially filled in parking lot to parking lot. There is a swale in there, but it's not, it's not been maintained. So it's backing up water a little bit, which is why I think it's spread out and forms sort of the Phragmites meadow back there. And then as you come down along the bottom of the site, it becomes a much more distinct slope, vegetated with invasive plants along the slope, but then you do get down into some dogwoods and some native plants out in the meadow itself. It's sort of a shrubby meadow mix in that area to the south. So with that, I mean, I think what I'd like to do is turn it over to Brad, because I think what a key feature of what we're proposing to do now is going to be developing the site in a way that's going to manage stormwater and provide an awful lot of value to the community in terms of taking sports medicine north, which I think everybody in the room, so to speak, is familiar with, and all the good work that they do, and the fact that they're currently split in a couple locations in Newburyport, and this will give them the ability to combine all of that into one site and better serve the patients and the community. So, Brad, do you want to jump in?
Good evening, Brad McKenzie, McKenzie Engineering Group, representing actually co-applicant Sports Medicine, Orthopedic Surgery, and Conserve Group. I think Peter Van Slyke from Conserve is here, who may be able to answer some questions about the proposed operation. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about existing conditions. I know Tom talked about the wetland boundaries and historic use. Since about 2000, it has been used as a contractor's yard. Large soil stockpiles surcharging the site. A lot of equipment stored there. As Tom mentioned, the site is essentially devoid of vegetation. There's almost exposed gravel from wetland boundary to wetland boundary. The entire site is located within the 100-foot buffer zone to the flagged BVW. As Tom mentioned, the drainage ditch in the along Henry Graff Road is within a 20-foot wide municipal easement. By vegetation, it's a BVW. It's man-made and it's been maintained as a drainage facility, I guess you could say, for a number of years. We did accomplish some soil testing. The test pit locations are shown on the existing conditions plan, and a geologist was out to confirm the results of the soil tests. And what we noticed is that there's to no one's surprise, about 4 to 6 feet from the ground surface, there's a dense clay layer. The water table, for the most part, sits right on top of that layer. And there's, for the most part, the first 0 to 4 to 6 feet of material is fill over that clay layer. So the site is not, in its current condition, is really not conducive to infiltration of stormwater runoff. And we'll talk a little bit about the proposed drainage system in a minute. Andy, I think you're on sheet C1. So what we'll talk about initially, we'll touch on zoning. The site will require a special permit for the medical use and site plan review with the planning board. We're on the agenda for tomorrow evening with the planning board. There's a land usage table that discusses how the site will comply with all the dimensional requirements in the industrial I-1 zoning district. There's a parking calculation table that demonstrates compliance with section 7B of the ordinance as well. I think it's important to note that in looking at the site plan and the layout, the applicant at one point was looking at a 3-story, 30,000 square foot GFA facility. And right before we filed the plans with the planning board on March 18th, decided to downscale it to a 20,000 square foot GFA. And of course, the parking count requirement would have been about 30% greater than is what is shown in this plan to support the additional floor area for the use. So as a result, we have more proposed green space than originally planned. So the C1 shows basically the layout and materials of the site. Cement concrete around the building, the requisite handicap spaces. Tom reviewed the landscape plan with you and I think it's also important to note that we did have a Zoom meeting with the various department heads in early April, and in that meeting, a lot of the feedback from the town was that they wanted additional green space, particularly increasing the landscaped islands within the parking lot. So what we did is we eliminated some parking spaces and added some street trees within those islands. You can see the four or five islands, or 6 islands within the interior of the parking lot. We also, at the request of the departments, did add some more street trees out by between the drainage ditch and the eastern edge of the parking lot. So those are some changes that were made when we resubmitted to the planning board in April. And I believe those changes were incorporated on the original plans that were filed by Tom with the notice of intent. I guess moving on to sheet C2, Andy, This is our grading and drainage plan, and this plan essentially highlights the proposed stormwater management system and how the site will be graded. And what we've done is, what really is driving the site grades, the proposed grades of the parking lot and building, is of course the groundwater table, and ultimately the elevation of the boundary of the bordering vegetated wetland and the drainage swale in the eastern portion of the site along Henry Graff Jr. Road. So knowing that the soil was not conducive to infiltration, it being a very silty clay or clay soil with a high groundwater condition, we could not incorporate any infiltration, traditional infiltration systems. So what we've done is we've designed the drainage system with two extended detention basins, one to the extreme west of the parking lot, which would handle the runoff from approximately 50% of the roof, and the rear, we'll say the western portion of the parking lot. And then another basin, we call it stormwater basin number 1, in the eastern portion of the parking lot that would accept roof runoff, as well as the runoff emanating from let's just say the middle of the site, south of the building, over to the eastern portion of the parking lot. And the rear basin number 2 actually has an outflow device which connects to a swale behind the building, which conveys stormwater flows to the front basin number 1. And in a large storm event, the elevation of the water within basin number 1 is regulated by an outlet control structure, an 8-foot diameter orifice, and a V-notch weir. And we do achieve a reduction in peak rates of runoff as a result of implementing these best management practices into the stormwater design. We do provide the requisite 1 foot of freeboard in a 100-year storm event. And the treatment stream does result in removing 80% of total suspended solids by implementing deep sump catch basins, proprietary stormwater first defense units, and the extended detention basins. The drainage system underwent a peer review by PGC Engineering, and it resulted in some very minor modifications to the plan set. And at Mr. Christensen's request, we did revise the methodology that we employed in our HydroCAD hydrologic analysis, our post-development analysis. And really what it did is it confirmed the results of our original analysis. And in a letter dated May 1, 2020, PGC indicated to the planning board that all of his comments relative to stormwater have been addressed, and he recommends that the stormwater management plan be approved. Sheet C3 is nothing more than a utility connection plan, and these plans will be further developed as construction set of drawings, and as more I guess coordination occurs with mechanical engineers and the various other disciplines as the project plans are completed. I think it's important to note that we did receive some comments from City Engineer White, as well as Deputy Chief Bradbury, within the last week and a half. The plan revisions that were accomplished in response to Deputy Chief Bradbury were basically adding a yard hydrant on site, which is shown on sheet C3, and some revisions that were accomplished pursuant to a review from Mr. White were making some modifications to the grading at the site entrance. And this is a submission that we actually made on Monday. We submitted a revised sheet C1 and C2 to show the comments, the recent comments, or in response to recent comments from both town officials. And I'm not sure that, Andy, I think you're showing the most recent sheet C2.
Brad, this is the one you just submitted. And
Okay.
Andy, I think, Brad, you're going to the crossing. Andy, can you zoom in on the crossing area?
I'm going to the entrance. If you could zoom in,
Yeah.
please, on the entrance.
Yeah, hang on just one second. I just want to make sure. What is the date of the plans that you submitted that are the most recent?
I believe they were the 15th, Andy.
Okay, yeah. So that is. Hang on one second then. Yeah, just FYI, and just so the commission members and applicants understand, one of the issues that we've been having that I've asked my staff to coordinate with applicants is just that when the plans are submitted, the dates are not all consistent, and sometimes they don't have dates in the file names, and unfortunately they've been posted without that information. So it makes it a little bit harder to determine which plans are which, especially when projects have lots of plans coming in. So anyway, I'm switching over to the plans that are dated 5/15. But I just ask in the future just that folks could clearly identify the plans with dates in the file name as well.
Understood. And we understand that the filing was probably not timely from the commission standpoint and probably planning boards, but we did receive the comments from Engineer White. I think it was either early last week or late the week prior, and worked through some revisions last week. And at a planning staff's recommendation, we did submit them because we thought it was important that one of the modifications involved eliminating a sidewalk, and again at the recommendation of the city engineer, along Henry Graff Jr. Road. We did propose a 4-foot sidewalk originally. The city engineer didn't think it made sense to kind of piecemeal a sidewalk in on one site when there's no sidewalk on, I don't know, half a mile of roadway between intersections, and thought it would be prudent, I guess, to look at this as part of more of a comprehensive plan. So we did remove the sidewalk on the set of drawings dated 5/15, and again at his recommendation did regrade and super elevate the proposed entrance. I guess soften the grades from about 9 or 10% to less than 7%. So the 15 and 16 contours, if you could, Andy, blow up that intersection a little bit. Right in there, we did regrade that area on the plan and super elevate it to direct the stormwater runoff more, I guess, in a southerly direction, and added some spot elevations, 14.1, 14.2 along the existing gutter to, I guess, illustrate that we're maintaining that existing gutter line. And in connection with all of this, it involved raising the existing grade along the alignment of that, say kind of a grayscale underneath. There's a 24-inch culvert. So by raising that grade, it's necessary to extend the shoulder on the north side of the entrance, as well as extend that 24-inch culvert by about 10 feet and regrade it down at a 3-to-1 slope. Add some wood beam guardrail to both sides. And as a result, we're altering about 150 square feet of that drainage ditch, which again is flagged as BVW by Tom. So we thought it would be a good idea to get this at his recommendation, make the changes and get the plans, although right before both meetings, to both boards and to get some feedback now rather than in a few weeks.
Yeah, Brad, if I can add, in that area, the area where we're extending the culvert is the most swale-like area. Adjacent to the swale, there is BVW vegetation, but that's primarily closer to the other access road to the condos out back. In this area, it really is much more swale-like. So less BVW, I guess, is, sort of, all of the swales have somewhat of a BVW fringe in the industrial park. So we end up, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, about 150 square feet of impact to the swale from this.
Yes.
And
yep.
Yeah, so I think what we wanted to know is if the commission, I know with swales, we generally handle them a little differently. The sort of presumption is that they are important for conveyance of water between resource areas and conveyance of stormwater. So we're not impacting the ability for them to convey water, but one opportunity we do have is a little bit of an upland shelf in that area that you can see with flags 8, 10, 11, or A9, 10, and 11. As we, where we could actually create maybe a little bit more storage in that swale system by digging that out to more than offset the 150 square feet, and also make the swale system a little bit more resilient, because right there is where the water goes in twin 48-inch pipes to go to the other side of the road. So it might not be a bad spot to create some additional storage if the commission wants that.
Okay. And I think it's important to note that also as part of the drainage, within the drainage report, we have a detailed construction phase and post-development phase operation and maintenance plan that discusses in detail the maintenance requirements and responsibilities of the owner in perpetuity of the drain for the stormwater management items. So with that, unless Tom has anything to add, I guess we'll open it up. Any questions the commission might have?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is if you look at the grading plan, you can kind of clearly see how that narrow strip of mowable fescue along the edge of the parking lot is going to fit pretty nicely with the topography. I don't know that there's any kind of demarcation needed, but we're certainly open to discussion.
Andy, if you could go back and blow up that same area you had blown up before. So what is the on this, what is the edge of the grass and what's the edge of, I'm not an engineer, so is that double line the edge of the parking lot?
The double line is the curb line.
Okay. So to the right of that would be some footage of grass, and then we get to the wildflower mix, and I don't know, that doesn't look to me like there's a big difference in grading there.
Well, if you look right along the double side there, right, you've got you essentially are sort of flat right off the double line, and I think the slope drops off is the way I look at that. Is that Brad? Am I correct in reading how you intend that?
It drops off more abruptly at a 3-to-1 right on the landscape side of the curb, the closer you get to the entrance. But we do show, I guess it's around a 5-foot strip that extends from where that guardrail would be all the way up. If you look, again, looking back at the landscaping plan, all the way along the perimeter of the paved parking area.
So maybe we can we get into that landscape plan that was in the presentation thing, Andy?
Yep, I'll switch to that.
All right, thanks.
Is that,
It's in the presentation material one.
Yeah, it's in Tom's presentation. It's sort of one of the first few plan sheets, right?
Yeah. It's also in my full NOI, but I tried to do that presentation material so you didn't have to flip past all the narrative and butters lists and everything.
yeah, I know. Sorry, just trying to be clear. You say in your presentation slide. This
Yeah, right
There it
there.
is.
There it
That's
is. Yeah.
That's it right there? Okay.
Right. So if we can zoom in on that same area.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah. You know, I guess we have the trees going in. You know, the wildflower meadow essentially should only be mowed once a year. After it's established, it's a couple times the first year, and then once a year. But the fescue would be mowed more regularly, probably every 3 weeks ish. I mean, it basically doesn't grow very fast, but the longer you let it go unmowed, the more sort of rough in appearance it gets. It doesn't need to be mowed, you know, every other day like a typical lawn.
So the fescue is kind of a lime green, and that's a 5-foot wide strip. Is that?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'd like to have some kind of a demarcation there, because
Okay.
I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if, I mean, we could certainly at turn points probably put something that some type of marker. You wouldn't want to clutter the site with a bunch of things, but just something so that.
Or maybe, Tom, like you did, or we did in some of the other projects where we have meadow areas that need to be mowed in a different kind of a schedule.
Yeah.
You did this on Hale Street, where you created a plan for the landscapers to have, for the property owners to give to their landscapers, that shows very clearly the with reference points on the ground where they should be mowing and where they shouldn't be, because landscapers can go out there with their mowers and just go crazy. So, but if they're given a plan that shows specifically with reference points on the ground what to do where, then that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the best way to do this. And we could clearly take this plan and we could clean it up for the landscape folks and basically put an arrow and say, mow fescue 5 feet off curb line.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think, Brad, we could put something together like that.
Sure.
And then, we could I'm looking at like at the bottom of that screen right there, you can see we've got those sort of informally clustered trees. We could probably put 2 of those trees right on the cut line.
Right.
Without much difficulty. And then basically, and that would line right up with that 5-foot strip further on. So I think that's probably the easiest way. And then we certainly, we could work with the commission if there was any areas of, once it's done, if there are any areas in particular before COC that appear problematic, we could either update those instructions or talk about it, an individual post or something here or there.
So Tom, since we're on this landscape plan, and I appreciate you all putting in the trees in the islands and scattered around the site. I think that's great. But I'm just wondering, you've got these red maples on these landscape islands within the parking area, and the islands look really small for the size that these red maples might want to get to. And I'm worried about the pavement underneath. And is that really the right location for those type of trees?
In terms of, red maple is certainly used by landscape architects in parking lots and in parking lot islands. I think in some sense, I think it could be looked at maybe within the islands as maybe a placeholder, and when they're under construction, if they consult with a, you know, a landscape architect that wants to substitute another native, you know, I think those ones are more of a an intent to show that we're going to be putting trees there, and definitely that they would be native.
Right. And they're great with, you know, wet areas and all that. I'm just wondering if these little parking lot islands are really the right spot for them.
Right. I mean, the problem you always have with this stuff, and granted, I'm the wetland guy and not really a landscape guy, but I certainly, you know, I was very comfortable doing the landscape plan as far as the perimeter goes. And then when we added into the islands, I see them as something that I've definitely worked with landscape architects who have put red maples in islands, right? But I'm open to anything else. I mean, if you put something like an amelanchier, which would be a great small tree, they're not really giving you full-on trees, which as I understood what the city was looking for, but they also interfere with traffic because they've got lower branches. I mean, much as when you're driving on Merrimack Street around the parking garage, some of those things are, you know, pretty wide.
I would just want to make sure that a landscape architect felt good about them going in those particular islands. I like the idea of them. I like the idea of the shade that they'll give and how big they can get and whatever, but just make sure that they're not going to cause problems.
It might make more sense to put a larger tree in the middle of each island, if you're talking about the two islands up front.
Right.
And complement them with some lower shrubs on each side or something like
maybe.
that.
Right.
How wide are those islands? They look like they would be at least 10 feet wide.
They are, let me see.
There's a tractor for reference there.
I'd say about 10 feet, it's fair, yeah. 8 feet, 8 feet.
And how long are they?
30, let me see, almost 40 feet.
Oh, I think there's plenty of room for 2 red maples in each one.
Okay, you think that's
fine? But I'm not a
fine?
landscape architect, so.
Well, but you know trees better than I do. If you think that that's fine, great.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't have recommended something totally silly in there, but I am open to somebody who's, you know, whose profession it is later, if they look at it and say, you know, gee, I'd rather have a couple black gum, or I'd rather have a couple, you know, a couple other natives go in there, or mix up the variety. I think what I would just suggest is at that point, it would just be something where we'd approach the commission with a plant change. And I assume we would also have to do it as a minor with the planning board. But I think the intent here is to show that we're committed to putting trees in those islands.
I mean, red maples are not a shallow rooted tree, so I think they'd be fine.
Well, they will be in that soil. I have a rather large red maple that started off as a 10-foot red maple in the middle of my yard, and it's, I don't know, 50 feet tall now, somewhere around that. And because, you know, this area, they are going to grow, but their roots, because of the clay, they're not going to go down very deep.
Yeah, the clay, I think, Brad, you said it's 6 feet below existing. And what's the proposed grade where that area is? It's going up a little bit, right?
It's coming up about 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
Yeah, I think there's enough room to water table that I don't think we're at least immediately going to get pavement heaving out of it. I mean, maybe 30, 40 years down the road, I don't know. But again, we're certainly open to any suggestions the commission has on how we deal with those trees. And, you know, and then, you know, as sports medicine is sort of going through, you know, the construction of the building, I mean, the thing that often happens is, you know, during construction, you start looking at plan availability, or you start looking at more detail at some of these things, and you want to make a swap out. But I think a red maple is a perfectly good parking lot tree. It's used oftentimes. I mean, just they get away from the kind of red maple that I usually propose to you guys, and they get into things like October Glory and, you know, all these different varieties of the red maple.
That's fine. I think that's fine. Leave it there. Leave it there. The only other comment I had on the landscape plan was the invasives control that you pointed out, and what do you anticipate actually doing in terms of invasives control?
So what we put in there is that we're willing to do it. And there are two areas in particular that I think would add some value if the commission wants us to undertake it. One is along the slope, but there's not a lot of room. If we can zoom out a little bit, Andy.
Yep.
Yep, just same plan. So along the, assuming that the top is north, along the southern side there, there's not a lot of room to the property line, but the slope down to the wetland has some invasives on it. And I would love to clean that up. I would envision that we could submit an invasive protocol to you. It's going to probably be a lot of pulling followed up with possibly, if we get a lot of regrowth, we may need to do an aquatic safe like triclopyr treatment, but you've got multiflora and you've got honeysuckle and things like that in that area. And in the rear of the site, there's Phragmites, but because it goes off site, I'm not sure how successful we could be in managing that. If you look kind of this in the upper left there, there's just a little bit of Phragmites that's on property, and the bulk of the stand is on the condo property next door. And then there is some frag along the back that could be cleaned up, but it's an awful lot of effort, and I'm not sure that we'd win that battle. So I think the area on the southern side would be worth the effort, and I think that the area down in the swale between the site and Henry Graff Jr. would also be worth the effort. I think it would clean up the look of the site from the road. So I think it would be beneficial just overall from an aesthetic point of view. But also there's just an awful lot of invasives on that slope. And that kind of brings me back around to the question that we asked when we, with regard to the change we made at the engineer's suggestion to rather than having a wall that we go down to that, or a steep slope down to the swale on that right-hand side, the fact that we're going to impact 150 square feet of swale, if we dug out a little bit of that side in the upland area there, we'd end up removing a bunch of invasives with it. So I would, if the commission wanted us to undertake invasives here, I think the places I would do it would be along Henry Graff and then along the southern side, where it would really clean up the appearance of the site and also make a better transition to the more valuable resource areas.
So Tom, could you put together, or you and the engineer put together, a plan for increasing the storage capacity in that swale and removal of invasives?
Sure.
For the commission to review? Because I think those are both good ideas, but I think we just need to see what that's really going to entail.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen the invasive plans that I've done for other sites. It would be very similar to that for the woody vegetation. Essentially, in areas where we can, we would pull. If we can't pull, we would treat with an herbicide, monitor the death of the plant before it gets removed. And we can do that. What do you think, Brad? You think we could just update the landscape plan to show a couple invasive areas?
Sure, and I think you can make some revisions to the grading plan to show how the grades would change there as well.
Perfect.
Tom, what would be the difference between the wildflower mix that you're planning on using and a pollinator mix?
Well, so the wildflower mix essentially is a pollinator mix. We would use the New England showy wildflower, which is just not called a pollinator mix, but it is full of pollinators. The showy wildflower has sort of more black-eyed Susan and more sort of bright stuff that is kind of showy. So given the location where that is, especially like on the north side, you're kind of going to be looking at it from the condo road and a little bit from Henry Graff. I thought, it'd be nice to have that kind of an appearance, but it was created before pollinators, the pollinator movement sort of came into being. So the Ernst pollinator mix includes a lot of stuff that is less showy, but is good for the pollinators. But there's nothing wrong with the New England showy wildflower for pollinators. Every plant in it is good for pollinators.
Okay.
And actually, if anybody has been over to Lena's Seafood on the go-kart track and seen all the black-eyed Susans around that thing, that was New England showy wildflower mix done about 10 years ago.
I'll stop by and take a look at it.
Yeah. You have to see it at the right time of year, of course.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't do any good right now.
I don't think you can even drive in there now.
Yeah, I'm not sure go-karts are an essential service either.
Apparently hair salons are.
Yeah, well, my haircut's arriving by UPS tomorrow.
Okay. Do we have anything else?
No, I mean, I think I would just put to you that this project to me is one that, I mean, I'm sort of really happy bringing to you guys for a number of reasons. One is we're bringing stormwater management and greening up a site that really needs it. And the other thing is, just for anybody who's dealt with Sports Medicine North, it's one of those businesses that I think we need to encourage to be in Newburyport, remain in Newburyport, and thrive in Newburyport. And as somebody who's been a patient of theirs and then had to go to a different facility for the PT part, it will be really nice to have it all in one place. And I think it's just a real great project for the city. So, anything we can do to work with you guys to make it better, we're happy to do. But
I don't like it because I used to be able to walk to where they are.
Well, yeah, well, but their PT center is not too far away from here. Right now, it's in the building that was used as a library before.
Right.
Yeah.
So the PT folks who are used to going to that PT place aren't going to go much further, and they're going to have a better parking and a better situation in terms of what's available to them. And then if they need to see their doctor at the same time, they're in the same building.
Yeah, before COVID, I had to park. I went over there several times, not to them, but and had to park in the Anna Jake's lot because this place was mobbed.
Yeah, it's a busy building they're in now, and just being separated from the PT has been something that, I've been over there for an appointment and had to race over to PT and been late because my appointment ran 10 minutes over, and that kind of stuff just doesn't become as much of a problem.
Right.
But again, it's an excellent business to be encouraging to grow in Newburyport.
I can't help but wonder looking at this site plan, did you earlier, Brad, say that they had 30% more parking when they had this at 3 floors? I can't see. I can't see where you could get another third.
It would have been an engineering challenge and a very costly stormwater system, because we would have had chambers underneath the parking lot and perhaps more fill, but the original development plan was a 30,000 square foot building with 3 stories. So again, in order to support the use, you have 30% more parking. So we were close to 130 spaces.
Yeah.
At one point.
It just doesn't seem like the areas match
Yeah.
up.
Again, those stormwater basins would have been probably under, at least one of them would have been underneath the parking lot. And with more impervious surface comes more peak rates of runoff. So it's you kind of creating your own hardship in a way. But I think the applicant is comfortable with this scale of development, and so the cost obviously was a consideration, the site work was a consideration as well.
Steve, I'm surprised you haven't asked your standard question.
Well, I've been thinking about it.
Mhm.
How about a green roof?
Yeah, that was half-hearted, dude.
Would that help with the stormwater management?
No, I don't think it would help with stormwater management. I think that we would still have to treat it in accordance with state regulations, the DEP stormwater management regulations, as impervious, because you're going to need a membrane. You're going to add a water load to the roof, and you're going to need, eventually that water is going to flow through a roof drain down to a detention facility. So it really won't help with the calculation.
Well, it should slow the flow down so that, you know, your peak time is stretched out.
It might decrease the time of concentration theoretically, which would theoretically decrease the rate of runoff, but obviously with that becomes structural concerns and more elaborate design for the roof system and the supporting structure. So I don't, again, I think it's a medical office building also. So I think, I'm not sure what kind of an amenity that would be. If it were a residential building, say an apartment building or a condo building, and there would be a place where people would want to congregate, a kind of a common area up there, I think it might add something to the development. But I think in this case, I don't see it really being used for this use.
I think in the one where we did a green roof in the park, not too far from here, I think the thing that we found when we looked at the numbers was the you know, for that area, it only helped in the smaller storms, and you have to get into a lot more storage capacity on the roof to be able to deal with the 100-year event. As Brad mentioned, you know, we're going to be able to, you said a foot of freeboard during a 100-year event. To be able to store a 100-year storm on top of that roof would totally change the structure. And we did talk about that as a project team, and I think we decided to try to focus on really trying to green up the site with as much native material as we could site-wide. And then in areas that needed to be sort of more manicured looking, using a fescue, which is a sort of a native, you know, it's not necessarily native to Massachusetts, but some of the varieties are native to Mass. The others are native to portions of the U.S., but they're very drought tolerant and require less maintenance. So we tried to focus some of the benefits on the landscape part of it, and provide good quality stormwater management. But the green roof just didn't seem to work for the client.
Well, you could
or for the
you
site.
could just consider it as a third floor that you can't use. I'm kidding. All right.
Do you have a DEP number for this?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any DEP questions?
No.
Comments?
Nope.
Okay. Were we looking for some other redone plans or something, or we
Yeah.
gonna do a continuance?
So I think they need to give us a revised grading plan and landscape plan that shows the additional flood storage capacity in that swale against Henry Graff Road, as well as more specifics on what they plan to do for the invasives control. And I think that's it, though.
So can I ask, if we were to continue to the first meeting in June and get that information into you by, say, you know, next Tuesday/Wednesday, do you think you might be able to get an order of conditions ready for being issued that night?
When you say issued that night.
Well, I mean signed and sort of issued shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, it's already essentially drafted. It's just a matter of whether or not there are any other concerns or questions that the commission has.
Yeah, I mean, because we've got planning tomorrow night. So, you know, even if they got in and out of planning tomorrow night, the appeal periods work such that I don't think it would cause any kind of, you know, undue delay for us to continue to the next meeting. So I just would like
Yeah,
to
it's
try
only
to.
2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, there's no issue in getting plans from this office,
yeah,
probably by Monday.
right. And I'll just have to write up the invasive protocol. I want to swing by and just double check the invasives in the area, exactly what's there, so I can make sure it fits. So yeah, we'll be able to get something to you early next week, and we'll also submit hard copies of the updated plans, and get all that into you. So yeah, so let's ask that you continue to the first meeting in June, and hopefully we can have everything resolved then.
Can you also describe what you have in mind for delineation between the grass and the wildflower mix? You know,
Yeah, and I think what we would be, yeah, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this plan and we'll probably end up having to blow up, you know, maybe separate this out into more focused sheets, and then just basically have clear directions for the landscape crews. You know, measure 5 feet off the curb line in this area, you know, measure to 5 feet off the back of the building in this area.
Does the bylaw require conservation posts?
They do in areas where it makes sense for demarcation of the 25 foot. In this case, it doesn't make sense, but I think we may want to put some posts in individual spots where it makes sense. But in areas like those narrow strips off the parking, I think that's an easy just descriptor. But there may be some other places. You and I can go over that, Brad, and just see where it makes sense to maybe put a post here and there. But
or just tell the landscaper he's got to use a 5 foot wide mower and only take one swipe.
Yeah, well, mowers aren't getting any narrower, so.
No. Okay, is there anything from the public? Okay. All right, and you're asking for a continuance to the next meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay. A motion?
Motion to continue to June 2nd.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Right.
Bye-bye.
And motion to close the public hearings.
So moved.
Second.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we have no enforcement / violations. So on to orders of conditions, and David Daly, the Daily Group, 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane.
Okay, we have a few special conditions for this project. In addition to our boilerplate, the special conditions would be 1, a split rail fence shall be constructed to run along the lot line of Lot 1 with a permanent plaque on the fence at the rear of the property that states that beyond the fence lies the City of Newburyport Public Conservation Area and protected wetlands. The next condition would be final landscape plan showing additional buffer zone plantings in the rear of Lot 1 shall be submitted to the Commission for review and approval prior to the start of work. And the last one would be the homeowners association document conditions shall ride with the deed for lot number 1, as well as the condominium properties associated with this project. That's all I have.
Okay, I just wanted to get a sense of the commission on whether you guys would prefer it along the fence, the plantings along the fence, or interspersed, or
All right.
in that area.
Well, they're going to have to submit the landscape plan for your review and approval. So
Okay.
you could kind of see what they come up with and then have them make changes if you don't like it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Joe, you would talk about having something, interspersed in the backyard there where that's a pretty small backyard as it is. And I think if you start putting shrubs or trees in there, you're kind of limiting what they can do.
They might just pull them out.
Well,
Whereas if you put them along the fence line, they'll probably stay.
I guess I would find it hard to. I find it hard to believe they would pull them out.
Yeah.
Because that was my point. Why would you buy a nice new house and you have all these decent shrubs in your backyard? Why would you pull them out?
Right. If they made it as part of a nice landscape design, but something that was also serving the purpose of buffer zone enhancement.
Right, and it's just, for me, it's a disincentive to go tear everything up and plant grass back there.
Right.
Where if you have it along the fence line, they're wide open to do that. And I thought our emphasis was to keep that, since it's a 25-foot no disturb, to keep it as natural as possible. And they're going to plant it, they're going to seed it as natural stuff too. So that was my point, just as something to get in their way of messing with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, we'll
see what they come up with.
Yeah.
Oops.
Okay.
Okay. That it? Anyone have any other thoughts about that project, or is that good for special conditions?
Make a motion to.
We do a variance on that.
They do not need a variance on that. They got themselves out of the 25-foot no disturb.
Okay.
Well, they're doing some grading, actually. Wait, they do need a variance on that, David. You're right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
So this is like last week.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
used some type of logic that sprung us from that.
Andy helped us out with the logic.
Yeah.
My screen just went completely blank. Anybody?
Well, at least we can hear you, Steve.
Yeah.
I think by voting on issuance of an order of conditions, you're essentially allowing you're voting on the variance at the same time. And I can write up the variance with the language that they used in the application, which was fairly well done by Lisa.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is Andy. I think that's a correct interpretation. Is if you've approved it, you've effectively granted that. So.
Did we highlight that in the notes? I didn't bring it up in the last ones, but maybe we should.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Stipulate that in the notes that by virtue of issuing this order of conditions, we're approving the variance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any issue between the public and private playground? Sounds like that's been kicked around at all different levels. Do we care?
Well, I don't think it's our domain.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of the variance. It's one thing to build your own playground. It's another to do a public one.
Yeah, this is Andy. You're talking about Colby Farm.
Yeah.
There's been a little bit of back and forth on that one, because obviously Lisa got a different response after talking to the mayor than the mayor gave to us as a direction earlier today. So I don't know. I asked her. I sent an email to her during the meeting just to ask if she could clarify for Molly and the rest of us, what position she does take, on behalf of the city now, if that's changed. But it is ultimately going to be up to the planning board to decide what to allow. But as I understand it, they're now proposing to resolve that safety or conflict issue that was raised by Molly by still putting the playground in, but calling it a private one just for the neighborhood and not a public one. I don't know that really resolves the issue, but it seems to be that they don't want to drop that element of the project. And while I actually like the idea of having a playground for that neighborhood. It's just a little bit difficult for us to not know which position we should represent to both the commission and the planning board at this point. So hopefully we'll have some clarity before they go to the planning board tomorrow night, at which point the plans may or may not change for that area.
I was mostly thinking of Julia, and when she writes it up, you might be careful about it.
Yeah, with regard to the findings for the variance and using a public playground, yeah. I might just avoid that because there's the main public benefit, I think, related to conservation is the open space.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Paul?
Anything else? Okay. Get a motion?
Motion to issue the order of conditions for Copley Farm Lane.
Second?
Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
David Warshall, Dan Warshall, sorry.
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we have anything else?
That's it.
Yeah.
I got one question. Do we have a new building inspector?
Bob Armstrong.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, essentially, right? I mean, Andy, there's nobody else.
Yeah,
It's Bob.
he has to apply for the position formally as the chief, commissioner of the city, but he's effectively been filling that role right now, and he's had done that since Peter Burnett left. So,
Yeah, I guess I didn't know he left. So.
Right.
for all intents and purposes, he is the building commissioner. So, I would assume that he'll stay in that role. He seems to be pretty good at what he's doing, as far as I can tell. So, I would expect him to stay in that position and take the full commissioner role.
Yeah, I think he's been actually excellent so far. There's a lot of communication with Bob and the planning, at least with me, more so than there was prior to. So I'm hoping that he stays put.
Yes.
So he knows the issues on Plum Island.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Has he been with the city long?
No, not too long. He tends to err on the side of caution rather than, he's more conservative. Like he'll check with everybody before he makes a decision on something, just to make sure that we've all seen it and looked at it and are okay with it. It's
Good.
Well, it's kind of like what he should do, right?
He's not resistant to checking with other city ordinances that don't involve the building code, which is a good thing.
Right.
A good thing, I think.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yes.
I vote yes. Good night, everybody.
all right.
Good
See
night.
y'all on June 2nd.
Yeah.
Thursday at 3.
All
Oh, right. Thursday at 3. Thursday, Steve, Thursday at 3.
That's correct.
All right. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep, thanks, Andy.